Noor. Right now,
Hello, everyone. Hello. We are slowly going to start. Has everyone found a seat? Has everyone given a hug? And hello. Yeah, we are slowly going to start. Is that a technical issue here? No. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Isabelle Chopin. I'm MPG's director, and it's really an honor to speak to you today on behalf of MPG. For those who do not know us well, but I assume you all do, we are a Brussels-based think and do tank. That's very important because we do not only think, we also do stuff, dedicated to evidence-based research projects and campaigns in the field of integration, anti-discrimination, and migration. It's also an honor to warmly welcome you all here in the Press Club room, Brussels, and to have almost 90 participants here in presence and over 250 participants online for the presentation of the MIPEX results update for the 27 EU member states. Also happy to welcome all our speakers, the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, FRA, all the experts in the field, basically. So welcome, everyone. It's also an even bigger pleasure because this event also celebrates the 20th birthday of the MIPEX. We started in 2004, but the celebration does not stop there. We're also celebrating MPG's 30th anniversary. 30 years already. I mean, time really goes fast. As you might know, since the very beginning, MPG has been working on producing evidence-based research, comparative studies, policy papers, recommendation to achieve more inclusive society. And going backwards, 20, 30 years brings many recollections, of lively discussions around this new tool, which is now the MIPEX, a set of indicators we wanted to create. What are we going to do? How? Which country? Which thematic area are we going to choose? Do we focus on legislation only? Do we look also at implementation? And those of you who are familiar with the MIPEX could see and follow its evolution over the 20 years, not only regarding the number of countries, but also regarding the number of thematic areas that we are looking at. And we have in the room someone who remembers this discussion, who had worked on MIPEX years ago, and who, after spending 15 years at MPG, became one of our board members, Thomas Huddleston, who, together with Başak, will conclude this event today with a recommendation. So what is our vision? Our vision is very clear. We want a world where everyone fully participates and contributes to an inclusive society and public life. And that's not a dream, that's not something that is totally utopic, that's really what we want to achieve, and we still think it's possible despite the political climate. A world where people of all backgrounds not only have rights to equal treatment, equal opportunities, and safe, orderly migration, but also know, are aware about these rights and are actively using them. And I'm thinking about political participation here, notably. This is not merely a dream, as I said, not merely an aspiration, it's also a necessity for building society that are just, cohesive, and resilient. Yet we're very acutely aware of the challenges we are facing. Across Europe and beyond Europe, we are witnessing the rise of populist movements that support exclusivist rather than inclusivist policies. Their rationale is often rooted in social pressures and popular reactions. In this environment, maintaining a steadfast commitment to integration policies is more important than ever. Integration is not just a technical exercise, it's a political choice that shapes equality, social cohesion, and democratic trust. As migration continues to reshape Europe's social and political landscape, we must recognize that public discourse is increasingly fragmented. Policymakers need to develop clear, forward-looking strategies firmly grounded in evidence, and that's what we do at MPG, and that's what you will be demonstrated with the MIPEX. Ensuring the full social, economic, and political participation of migrants, for example, requires confident, informed decision-making that responds to complexity while promoting this inclusive society. MIPEX is really a unique tool, and it's comparing integration policies worldwide. It's used by policymakers, policy stakeholders, researchers, academia. I mean, everyone who works in the field is using the MIPEX. And we have we have been doing MIPEX for 56 countries in all continents, and we are continuing the update. We have just been updating, in addition to the 27 EU member states, also Canada and Japan. Başak was launching MIPEX Canada last week in both Toronto and Ottawa. Since 2004, MIPEX has provided crucial evidence on the quality of integration policies worldwide, and it has served as a compass guiding policymakers towards more inclusive, effective, and forward-looking integration practices. And we could see that every time we launch MIPEX, and there are these national launch, in many countries, there are lots of discussion on the national level, and eventually there are changes in the legislation and in the practices, and that's exactly what we want to achieve with MIPEX. Today, against the backdrop of the most recent comparative research results for all the 27 EU member states, this conference will explore how we can achieve equally high integration standards across Europe, what lessons can be drawn from both the reforms and the setbacks. In addition to the comparative launch, we're also organizing, as I mentioned, national launches, and the national launches have already taken place in Luxembourg, for example, but I'm certain Başak will tell you more about the national launches, and there will be more in the months to come. I also seize the opportunity to warmly thank the MIPEX researcher in the 27 EU member states. I know some of them are here in this room, and some of them are online. I thank you for your work, your dedication, and the time you spend during the lengthy consistency check. So everyone who has been a MIPEX researcher working on it knows what that means. MPG is constantly checking, and that's why we say evidence-based research. I would also like to warmly thank the MPG staff who has been working on MIPEX, whether it's on the content, on the communication, or on the logistics for the organization of this event here today. And now I would like to introduce you to Ali Al-Jaberi, who's sitting right here, who will be moderating the whole event. Ali is a former Europe correspondent for the Associated Press TV and an award-winning public speaker. He chairs high-level events across diverse topics in many countries. As a former lecturer in public policy and international relations, he brings deep policy insight and he ensures engaging relevant discussion with a strong audience interaction. But you haven't heard the best. He's also a national debating champion of the Netherlands. So he's going to make you debate, and that's what we are looking for, definitely, to have a lively interaction with you. So I'm looking forward to the presentation and the debate. Thank you very much, Ali, for being there. Ladies and gentlemen, the task before us is not simple, but it's vital. By investing in robust integration policies, we invest in the future of our society, one that is fair and inclusive for all. The only simple thing we have to do today, and that is ahead of us, is the reception that we're offering at the end of the event, and we are looking forward to also engage with you in a more informal manner. So I wish all of us, a very fruitful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, and congrats to you and to MPG and your staff on this excellent research. And thank you for your kind introduction, although you have set the standards rather high. Now, how does the program look like from here? We'll have a keynote in a second, and then we'll have 2 panel discussions where we expect indeed your participation, including those of you who are online, who can, during the panels, send their questions in over the chat. And we will conclude, indeed, as said, by having a drink together. Give a warm welcome to Başak, Yavçan.
So welcome all. It's a great honor for me to be here in front of you presenting the results of the Migrant Integration Policy Index for the period of 2020 until 2023, and for some countries 2024, because we did it in 2 batches. This has not been an easy process, but I am the lucky one here presenting you the results, but there is a big team, big research team, and many country experts from all around the world who are involved in this. And we have also been very closely engaged and cooperative within the MPG to make sure that we reach out to any possible funding to include more countries into MIPEX. So here, I'll start with some of the challenges just for you to see how hard this was. Currently, within this launch, I will be presenting to you the results for the EU member states. This is after many country launches we have had in Luxembourg, in Germany, in Netherlands, in Lithuania, in Ireland, exactly. It was a great one in Finland at their national integration in the event where there were 1,000 people. I believe that makes me a local celebrity in Finland, but we'll see if people will know me when I go there next time. And at the end of the day, we wanted to get more countries scored because that's the strength of MIPEX. However, it is not the best. Maybe the zeitgeist does not serve us well, and there's a lot of discussion on borders, return, and integration seems to be sliding down on the agenda. And for instance, we wanted to, especially not for Europe necessarily, because in the end, I mean, we got the EU member states covered, but for instance, we were going to cover some countries for the first time, Peru, Colombia, and we were going to continue with the Brazilian scores, but with the withdrawal of the US funding, the last minute at the contractual stage, we could not. Why am I telling you this? It is very important that we spread the word and we continue using MIPEX and making sure that we cover as many countries as possible so that many people, many policymakers, academics, researchers, NGOs can benefit from this open access data. So this presentation We'll be basically covering the importance of integration policies quickly, and then I'll be introducing you. MIPEX quickly methodology, Isabelle made my work very easy by talking about all the consistency checks, and then I'm going to be introducing you the comparative results, the preliminary findings, and there will be some discussion on some selected dimensions of integration, and I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to even make any conclusions because those we will be saving with Thomas until the very end, because we want to hear from the policymakers and reflect on potential policy recommendations that is viable and attainable. So why integration policies matter is basically an important question. And unfortunately, again, with the agenda a bit shifting around the world, sometimes it is not super evident. And that's why I wanted to include a slide and to really underline why integration policies are actually a viable policy alternative that brings sustainable inclusion and sustainable cohesion. And I'm underlining this because a lot of times the justification for securitized policies around the world is that there's a public demand for this. There are societal tensions. Well, we think that integration policies, implementing good integration policies, is the long-term sustainable solution to these societal pressures and the best way to ensure coexistence. In addition, there are, because MIPEX is an open resource data, we have seen using MIPEX or other resources, good integration policies foster a virtuous cycle of inclusion, openness, respect, and engagement among the communities. Both for the host communities and for migrants, we see that with good integration policies, there's a reduction of prejudice, there is a strengthened trust, and public perceptions of migrants or vis-a-vis migrants are also improved. And then good integration policies also address inequalities, the vulnerable groups in the area of health, labor market, or family unification. And then they shape belonging and participation with the citizenship rules, which influence a sense of identity, and then inclusive political participation, which boosts trust. You can see a lot more on these and how the good integration policies are linked to very good integration outcomes within the key findings of the report, but also within the policy areas that we're covering. For each policy area, we actually did a preliminary research showing you this impact. Now, at this point, we think that MIPEX is important because it gives us not something we don't know necessarily, and we were just talking about this with Tineke right before we started. We knew these results, but it gives us something solid to rest our case and to show with evidence that this is the situation. For a lot of countries, because of the long time span, starting from 2007, it gives a time perspective because we see recently a lot of backsliding, and it is important for the countries to look back and where they have been, what they have done in the past, or we see improvements. It's also good for them to look back and see how much they have improved. And there are 8 thematic policy areas. And this is also important because historically, when you look at integration policies, when I started formerly as an academic working on integration policies, I'm not going to name you any dates, but it was only naturalization policies that we were talking about. And then came MIPEX, and I actually was one of the first people within my circle in my American institution who used MIPEX to show how actually among the Muslim migrants within Europe, good integration policies, as evidenced by MIPEX, resulted in higher trust in the criminal system, in the justice system among the migrants themselves. So clearly, it provides us a very good comprehensive tool and comparative tool along these 8 policy areas, which go way beyond naturalization. Because as we know, countries have different histories, they have different approaches to citizenship, and just because a country is somewhat restrictive on citizenship doesn't mean that in all other areas of integration it's doing badly. So the target group for MIPEX is international migrants, in the EU language, that's third country nationals of all backgrounds, migrant workers, family united migrants, permanent residents, asylum seekers, even undocumented for some MIPEX items. The geographic scope is 52 countries. That was in 2019, and we're hoping to match it and exceed it. And methodology is with national experts and checks over 58 indicators. So this is an indicator-based research done with experts. And for each indicator, our experts who are among us here who have been through this arduous process know very well what we're talking about. We expect them to provide evidence of legislation, evidence of bylaws, strategy documents. So this is rather our understanding of integration may be subjective, but the indicators, they're not. And why am I saying our understanding of integration may be subjective? Because we believe in inclusion, and we think that everything that creates an obstacle for this inclusion is something negative for inclusion. So that's why if there's a barrier, there's an additional barrier, we punish the countries by not giving a score. And this, all in all, this made us the most cited international benchmark by policymakers, NGOs, and media research. Now, the next slide shows you those 8 dimensions. These are access to nationality, anti-discrimination, education, family union, health, labor market mobility, permanent residence, and political participation. When you log on to the MIPEX website, which is recently fully updated, you can see the data for the entire overall results, but you can also see and compare the data for these specific dimensions for your country or for the region that you're interested in. So, and I do invite you to take advantage of this. You can also download the data as well. Now, the moment has arrived. This is Brussels calling. And this afternoon, instead of the Eurovision points, we will be revealing the MIPEX scores. Now, who is hitting the right notes on integration, and where does the 12 points go to? Sweden, Finland, and Portugal for their inclusive policies. I must also add that we covered Canada as part of this update, and Canada, with its 81 points and improved points on integration, is also getting 12 points, even though it did not join Eurovision in my knowledge, because I actually do have a paper on Eurovision voting bias, so, but maybe in the future. And a respectable 7 points go to Belgium, Spain, Germany, and Luxembourg, who have slightly favorable policies. And you can see there is a lot of countries who may not have the best points, but I'm not gonna name and shame them the way British get usually named and shamed at Eurovision with the 0 points. But I made just many enemies in this room, I'm pretty sure. And but what you can see in this map clearly is that there is a big diversity, there's a big heterogeneity. What is also equally important is that there's a lot of stagnation that I want to underline. Over the years, when we updated MIPEX scores, what we have seen is there was a steady increase and very visible increase, very remarkable increase of scores. And you can see there's a lot of improvement in many countries. It's not because everybody is scoring 100 and there's no room for improvement. However, the average improvement for all EU member states is only 0.8 points. Yes, that's, yeah. And when we look at, and that is important. And moreover, there are a lot of backsliding countries that are backsliding, and there are things to improvements in couple countries that we're actually reaching that 0.8 points, and unfortunately, they are offset by decline in many other countries. So the average score over 100 for the entire EU member states is 54. So in case you want to compare your country against this average, this is where we are. So 54 is already not great, but there are many countries that you've seen who are below this. So some important trends that we want to highlight is even that we covered 2023 and for some countries 2024 with this update, and even in 2025, which we couldn't cover, we actually started to see, and actually as a Turkish immigrant living in Belgium, I personally experienced, going through naturalization, I've experienced these changes. There are many changes that are happening, restrictive citizenship policies across the EU, with more language requirements, with more residency requirements, a big exception, of course, being Germany, that lowered the residency requirements, and then allowed for dual citizenship. Another important observation is already the lowest area has been political participation, and that with the weakening of the national consultative bodies, even sometimes completely being dismantled, sometimes being displaced by bodies that are appointed by the governments, so not entirely independent, we're seeing a shrinking political participation space as well. And the next slide also shows some positive events. There are some good remarks as well. So there's some progress in education and labor and healthcare, actually. And some of these, especially in healthcare, are related to improvements linked to the pandemic. But we believe that in many countries, this is still a missed opportunity because the benefits did not last very long and they were temporary, just the way the pandemic were seen. And in the other area of education, there was some positive impact of the Ukrainian war with the arriving refugees. But again, either in many countries, they were not spilled over to other beneficiaries, other migrant groups, or they were short-lived. So there were not really changes in the access, but more like changes in information availability. And so I think we can also see the next slide with the scores, with also Canada in there. If you want to specifically look into them, because of the size of the screen, we couldn't make them larger. I do apologize for that, but they are available in the key findings that you have. But we do have a next slide that shows you something equally interesting, which are the changes. So where were there some improvements and some backsliding in integration policy? And as you can see, there are some countries who did improve, indeed, a lot more than that 0.8. Croatia, Spain, Poland, Romania, Slovenia, Germany, and these are the countries who actually benefited to these exogenous shocks and turned them into better integration policies. In some cases, that was the anti-discrimination legislation in Spain. In some cases, it was actually very important EU, the Commission's pressure in better implementation of the single market directive, making access to the labor market more equitable. And the remaining countries that you're not seeing here are those with no changes in the score. But that doesn't mean nothing changed in those countries. There were still some changes, but in the end, you know, one positive change was offset by a negative change. In the end, the score didn't change. On our website, you can see all the detailed information about how the countries did on different indicators, all the different 50-something indicators of MIPEX, and the latest developments in those countries which were not covered by MIPEX, which would have changed the scores, because this is such a dynamic policy area that we have to have a cut point, but there's so much happening afterwards, we don't want to omit that information either. So overall, in the slide, you see the areas of strength and weakness across the policy areas. There were some improvements in education, labor market, and anti-discrimination across the board. And in other areas, there were some negative changes in citizenship, family unification, health, permanent residence, and political participation. And in reality, the changes in citizenship and family unification were a lot more visible if we were to include the later periods as well. I just want to make sure how I'm doing with time. Anybody timing me or 3 minutes? Okay. All right. So let me tell you a bit about this progress in the labor market mobility. Again, plus 1.6 points. the single permit directive really played a role. The map you're seeing is only the labor market mobility area policies across the board. For instance, you can see all of a sudden Germany is really dark pink thanks to its inclusive policies. Here, what we're seeing is also reforms in Cyprus, Greece, Luxembourg, and Slovenia in reducing the waiting periods for asylum seekers, giving broader access to employment services and targeted support, as well as Greece for recognizing foreign qualifications and expanded employment support. What is not captured with this map are many policies implemented by member states regarding the high-skilled migrants, such as the Blue Card Directive. Because the beneficiaries are not the entire third country nationals, they are not directly affecting the score of labor market integration. The next one is, again, showing the impact of Ukrainian refugees on education in greater detail, which led to a 3-point increase, which expanded translation and multilingual school support, especially in Poland, Czechia, and Slovakia. And we've also seen visible reforms in Greece, Austria, France, and Croatia. The next slide shows the impact of COVID. And you can see that still health policies are 53 over 100, which is a rather low score for healthcare, which is such a basic right. What has improved is really superficial in terms of better information dissemination, some translation services, and involving migrants in the research and planning of the delivery of the services. Where we see the most visible improvements are Estonia, Poland, and Romania. And we can move to the next one, which is about access to nationality. Again, there is this, and there's a lot more that are not reflected in the scores. Tougher naturalization requirements, longer residency, higher language and economic demands in Greece, Cyprus, Belgium, Finland, and Sweden, and Netherlands, except for Germany. And we do really think that this is important, and I'm going to be discussing this further in the policy recommendations section, because there are also good ways and bad ways of, in general, these additional requirements act as barriers, but if they are implemented poorly, they act as mega barriers. So I will be giving some recommendations as to reduce them being their propensity to be mega barriers. So the next slide shows about the family reunification, and Tineke will be discussing this lengthy, reflecting on this. Again, very low 53 score, largely unchanged, but there were deteriorations in some countries. They are stricter in Ireland, Slovenia, and Netherlands. Because of the Brexit, UK is not covered by the current MIPEX update. If we were to include the UK, the score would definitely go down, because they have considerably increased the family unification requirements in relation to the economic requirements, the income requirements, and more inclusive. That's why there's no change, because in some countries they're more inclusive. Those are Portugal, allowing simultaneous entry. Imagine like you're entering together with your spouse, not doing a family unification procedure and waiting. Kudos to Portugal. And Croatia, there are limited rejection grounds, so the rejection is really made a lot more difficult. Vis-a-vis the political participation, still no seat at the table. I did touch upon a few things. Maybe I can just talk about the specific countries. There is weakening of consultative bodies in Luxembourg and in Denmark. And in Ireland, a country that has traditionally done so well in this area, and they were actually the benchmark for us for the political participation index that we also created, because it's such a bad area that needs a lot of improvement because of the lack of the new adoption of the new strategy. And one of our speakers will be reflecting on this. Unfortunately, there is a drop in score, actually, which was partly responsible for the 5-point drop, the highest drop in MIPEX scores on this round for Ireland. Finally, some good news, silver lining, anti-discrimination policies are evolving. There's an increase over 1.5 points, and especially in Spain, Romania, Croatia, and Slovenia, you can see big differences. In Ireland, there are some setbacks, Hungary as well. But there's at least more consistent progress than other areas. But something I want to underline, because our Canadian colleagues, experts, researchers, stakeholders are very vehement on this. Just because a country scores 100 on anti-discrimination policies does not mean there is no discrimination in those countries. It just means that there are avenues to address the grievances of those that are discriminated against. So I'm gonna, with the next slide, I'm gonna thank you for the entire MIPEX research team who has been involved in the MIPEX update, producing this research, producing these scores particularly. And of course, there is the entire MPG team who made this event today possible, and all the experts who made the scoring possible. I thank you very much for now, and turn to the panel to hear back on what they think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Başak, for your excellent overview. Let me check, is Brunner, has he found his speaking skills back after the break? Okay, no problem. Let me see. He did say it, yes, indeed. Given how efficient Başak was in addressing the matters that she addressed, we have some space for informative questions about the research in particular. So are there any questions on that? Anything that Başak should clarify? A clarification question, yes, here in the front. Yeah, you can come stand next to me if you want.
Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations. It's really good. I really want to know if you could tell a little bit more methodology, like what kind of methodology you use, and how much it was participatory or not, or how you involve migrant refugees in the discussion. So, and obviously women migrant. So I would like to know if you can share a little bit more.
Excellent. Thanks for that question. Yeah, let's see if there are more questions of this kind. Yeah, there's one more.
I think everybody can hear me. The voice is not done.
Maybe for the video stream.
Okay.
Indeed.
Hi, thank you so much. It was very interesting. I just wanted to know, coming from Greece personally, so I know a little bit more about discrimination and stuff. How can someone be sure that the data provided to you is actually real and not like fake news, let's say? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps one more, if there are any, of course. Yes, there's one in the corner to the left. And if you're online, as said before, please do send us your questions over the chat. We have an online moderator who then passes on the questions to me, and we'll try to address as many of your questions as possible first.
I just wonder if we see if those scores translate also with to the higher satisfaction of migrants in those countries.
That's the obvious question, huh? All right, Başak.
Thank you very much for these excellent questions. I'll go with the order that they were asked. Actually, I was lucky enough to take over this amazing tool that was created by my predecessors. So they know a lot more about the process within which these indicators were developed. But I do know that, because I do run into people and they tell me how they were generated in the first place. There were a lot of expert groups, both migrants, experts on migration, NGOs, academics, who worked on each one of these sets of indicators. And they were part of like a pre-tested on them. And they made sure, and over time, some of these indicators were merged. Some of the wording has been changed to better reflect the realities of migrants. We do hope to expand them further, especially there is a big outcry for including more items on housing and more items on making anti-discrimination strand harder to score high. And I think I'm willing to take up on that task with our great team. And we would like you to be involved in this as well. Turning to, I mean, this is a superficial answer to your question, and because I know Thomas is better placed in giving you a much better answer. Because he was involved in the earlier stages. And with regards to the question on Greece, so something that I should have emphasized maybe more is who these experts are that we work with. So these experts are people who are involved in integration policies and practices and research. So usually these are people, independent researchers who are not working for governments. So we're not taking the data from the governments. We're not asking them to answer the questions. We're working with independent experts who have usually very critical eye. And actually we do score policies higher than our experts score because they tend to be very critical and cruel because they do see the issues on implementation, obviously, which we're not directly capturing. But they are very critical, and these independent experts together decide on the scores, all of which are justified with specific policies and bylaws. After receiving them, we discuss them vis-a-vis the changes especially that took place within that country, because we do have a baseline to compare it to, but we also compare them to other countries. Just because a policy has been ranked highly, according to one expert in Ireland, doesn't mean that the same policy is seen the same by the other expert, because they don't know how each other scored. So we are the only ones who know that. So we help them compare. We tell them a similar country that scored similarly or differently to make sure that really is the final score. Again, I mean, it is possible that on certain issues we are overestimating, but on certain issues we are underestimating. But with all of these 58 indicators, I would say there is a very small, very, very small margin of error, because it's all an average that we're looking at the end of the day.
So what can you say on the impact on migrants?
Thank you very much, Ali. The last question is also very important. If there is no impact, why are we doing this anyhow, right? So there are some studies that we do, but there are also a lot of studies that are done by NGOs, by researchers, by policymakers, based on the data collected nationally, even locally, comparing how, for instance, in countries with better integration policies, migrants feel themselves. What is their sense of belonging, sense of identity, sense of trust? And we see very strong correlations with the integration policies and the well-being of migrants themselves.
As reported by the migrants.
Exactly, as reported by migrants. Could there be exceptions? Of course, there are certain periods within a country, or there could be certain time, certain countries within which there could be a lip service to good policies, but really poor implementation. Then that linkage would be missing. But a lot of times, studies show a strong relationship.
A very quick question from our online audience, and I thank you very much for your participation. Someone is surprised by Sweden's high score, saying our comparative research here at Also Met indicates that since 2022, Sweden has undergone a paradigm shift towards more restrictive, selective, and temporary migration and integration policy. So how do you explain the difference?
That's also a great question. I try to somehow capture this in my discussion of the cut points. So when we score these countries, we have to stop someplace, right? Finish the scoring and move on to the consistency checks and scoring and writing the report. With Sweden, this date was 2023. So what happens after mid-2023 is not captured by the scores, but our Swedish colleagues, researchers or practitioners can find these changes actually in the country reports at our website, because we try to capture as much of them as possible, and hopefully they will be in the next,
So
not hopefully, definitely they will be in the next MIPEX.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
The part is about the funding, if we get funding. That's the only thing.
Let that be repeated. The F word.
or until the end of the year.
Başak, thank you very much for your clarifications. Let me quickly note to set your expectations before you leave for the drinks later on that we do hope you will respond to the survey about the event by MPG, and that one will be online. We'll show you a QR code at the end and provide you with hard copies if you prefer, but there's also a survey by the funder, speaking of money, and we also hope that you respond to that. But I'll get to that at the very end. Let me see where we are now. We are now at our first panel discussion. May I kindly invite the panelists to come forward and take their seats. And as they do so, let me share with you what the title is of the panel. The panel is titled Raising Standards, Closing the Gaps. The format, and I'll introduce the speakers to you shortly, is as follows. I'll have 2 rounds of questions to the speakers, and then I'll open the floor for your input. And I hope, again, that you will be participating actively as you have done a bit ago. When you are online, please continue sending us your questions on the chat whenever you please, and we'll try to address as many of them as possible. Let me now introduce you to the speakers. From my perspective, sitting at the other extreme is member of the European Parliament, Tineke Strik. Give her an applause. Sitting right here next to me is the Head of Sector on Integration and Resettlement at DG Migration and Home Affairs of the European Commission, Aurlie Belzunces. Right in the middle, we are joined by Council of Europe Head of Intercultural Inclusion Unit at the Directorate General, my apologies, of Democracy and Human Dignity, Rita Marascalchi. Welcome, Rita. Sitting next to her is co-founder of the European Networks of Migrant-led Organizations and founder of New Women Connectors, Anila Noor. And last but not least, the only gentleman wearing a tie on the panel. He represents the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, Mr. Miltos Pavlou. Welcome to all of you. Let me immediately start the first round of questions, and I thank all 5 of you for your patience with my time management and your willingness to keep your responses short and concise in the interest of ensuring that equality and inclusion, right? That all of you have their fair share of speaking time, and the audience and members of the audience online can participate in our discussion. Wow, I see on my screen that there's a lot of questions already before you have spoken from the online audience. Good luck. Tineke, let me start with you, member of the European Parliament. Now, you have been quite outspoken on a key document of the European Commission that should touch on integration, and that is the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum. Do you agree with Başak that integration in this whole debate has somewhat been excluded, and is it perhaps also excluded from the pact or not sufficiently included? What do you think?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks a lot for the presentation. I found it very informative, and indeed I recognize a lot, but it's always good to have this evidence and also see some best practices emerging. Yes, I fully agree actually with, I have to say yes, that this pact was very much focusing, of course, on asylum, because it's, it's called Asylum and Migration Pact, but we see the biggest part of the package was about asylum laws and very much about admission. And there, if you look at the content of the rules, it's very much security oriented as well. So it's about having shorter procedures, more security checks at the external borders. And there's very little attention on integration and possibility, let alone, facilitating the integration. You see a little bit in the Reception Conditions Directive, where there is quicker access to the labor market, for instance, more emphasis on children having quicker access in the mainstream education, more attention for recognition of diplomas, for instance. But yeah, on the other hand, you also see loosening of the rights for people who get a doubling claim. And so it's a mixed bag, so to say, on that sense. And what I really think what is missing, especially because solidarity was so an important topic throughout this whole pact, if you really want to achieve a more equal share of the responsibility of asylum seekers, you should invest more in integration throughout the whole union. So you should also, on the one hand, have more rules on it, more funding for it, and better enforcement of it.
Now, the pact focuses on asylum, as you say. A lot of research shows that, in fact, if you start the integration process right at the outset, that would have very positive effects. Is that a thing that should be taken into account when you make asylum policies?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the one hand, you need, of course, actually, I think the basis for a good integration policy is legal security, legal certainty as soon as possible, because then people start concentrating on, on the participation and belonging of society, and family unification policy, of course, because once the family is together in the host country, then the integration can really start. So I think in that sense, quicker access to the labor market, as you say, quicker starting to participate is really key. So it's good that that has changed. Language courses, more language courses, actually from day one, I would say, because it's better for everyone, even if people have to return. But what you see, the family unification, for instance, the right to family unification is not addressed in the pact, but you see overall in many member states is declining. It's because of the differentiation between beneficiaries of international protection and of subsidiary protection. Although in the qualification regulation you see more alignment, the family reunification is excluded from that. And you see in many member states, of course, like Sweden, Denmark, Germany, now also in the Netherlands, that member states use this legal loophole, because it's also not in the family unification directive, of course, to take away the right to family unification of subsidiary protected, or to build in long waiting periods. And that is really devastating for their integration.
Thank you very much so far. Tineke, Aurlie, turning to you. Now, there's not only the Pact on Migration and Asylum, but of course the Commission is also working, for example, on the Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion. How do you seek to close the gap between the diverging standards of integration and raise the standards such that most countries have high standards?
Hello. So good afternoon to you all. Thank you for, I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to, if I may, correct you a little bit, because actually the action plan on integration and inclusion is part of the pact. And it was the very first text as part of the pact, which was issued by the Commission in November 2020. But so I think just to be clear that we should not say that the pact completely overlooks integration. And also, as Tineke has mentioned, you have quite a number of integration-related provisions in the RCD, in the Reception Condition Directive, as well as in the Qualification Regulation. But that being said, first of all, I would like to, so indeed, we missed the part where my boss, Commissioner Brunner, said that MIPEX was a gold standard. And I would like to also stress that in the action plan itself and in the recently issued midterm review, we very much try to have an evidence-based policy when it comes to integration measures. And so therefore, we think that MIPEX work together with the other data provider like OECD, for instance, on its settling in report, which as a great news, we are working with OECD on the next issue of the set of their settling in. We really aim at making integration policy as controversy proof as possible, and relying on hard fact and data. But okay. Again, as said, not as said, but we agree with, as said, we have issued the midterm review. Whew. And in the midterm review, of the action plan, and we issued it in June of this year, we basically have or share some common conclusions as MIPEX, and notably about the fact that the situation is slightly improving overall, but that there are still some challenges. But for instance, we in the labor market, when it comes to labor market integration, we acknowledge the challenges, and the Commission is already has already put in motion quite a number of measures to improve the situation. You tell me if I'm too long, huh? Very discreetly, something like that. So, for example, in the indeed in the qualification regulation, we have stronger provisions when it comes to the qualification recognition of third country nationals, and also same as MIPEX. We see that there has been a limited spillover when it comes to integration measures taken for beneficiaries of TPD towards other third countries. However, I would like to stress the Commission recommendation on the recognition of qualification of third country nationals, because this recommendation from 2023 actually comes or builds on what happened with Ukrainians, and how we put in place measures to help qualifications of beneficiaries of temporary protection to have their skill recognized. And I'm too long, so I'm going to conclude. As said, we overlap, but not entirely. And there are areas where that we don't look at. And citizenship and participation to the political life, we don't, as Commission, we are very uncomfortable with this topic. And we don't go there, but it actually circles back to the beginning, which is integration is a member state policy. It's a member state competence primarily. So if member states, we are here to support them, but that really lies in their hands.
That's indeed a matter to be taken into account. Now, and thanks for your input. Let me turn to you, Rita, of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is excellent, together with your members, of setting standards for human rights, for human dignity, etc. Looking at MIPEX, give us first of all your opinion. To what extent does it dovetail with your findings when you look at Europe? Especially because you seek to have policies, not just in migration, but overall, that are inclusive.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the excellent work done on MIPEX. What we see and hear in the Council of Europe membership, which is wider than the EU, is very much in line with the findings that MIPEX show. So the progress is lacking, situation is stagnating, and but we do see progress somewhere, and we know that it's possible. So we mostly see progress at the local level. We work very closely with what we call a network of intercultural cities. We see progress where these cities embrace a positive vision of diversity. They see inclusion not as a burden. They see diversity not as a challenge. They see inclusion as something that benefits the entire community, and they see diversity as an asset that can bring innovation, that can bring development, and it is part of the identity of the community. We see progress where local authorities are supporting and working together and cooperating and dialoguing that with the upper level of governments, where what we can call the multi-level governance of inclusion effectively takes place. We see progress where all stakeholders are part of the policy reflection and the policy making. We see progress where not only equality and non-discrimination are like the bedrock of integration, where participation is a kind of taken seriously. It's even in, for instance, at the local level, where often there's a more limited leverage on the legal framework for participation, especially when it comes to political or electoral matters. There are creative solutions, flexible solutions that put in place venues and approaches for participation of migrants, so progress is possible. Başak mentioned previously the virtuous cycle. It seems like we are not falling into a vicious cycle where there is kind of an emergency perception and which drives more divisions, which drives more kind of security-oriented responses. One important ingredient of progress is when you have also kind of a long-term vision backed by political commitments. You need the leadership to lead, and you need to project a positive vision of confidence rather than fear. So we can do better. And what we see in cities show that it's not only possible, but it is beneficial for the wider community. And we can also leverage that experience to do better at the state level.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that point. Turning it to you, Anila, now, of course, you're involved in this topic, among others, through the Commission's expert group on the views of migrants in the field of migration, asylum, and integration. So you know a lot about the political policy participation of migrants and migrant women. Now, this area was explicitly addressed by Başak, saying we're lagging behind there. Why is that the case, and what can be improved?
Thank you so much for this question. This is very complex for me to answer, but I can say, if we could summarize in my experience, if I share all the migrants or refugee, and when they are women or diverse gender, there are multiple actors, multiple identities, and multiple elements. Because women who are living in home countries, they are mostly have a less access to understanding how they can have approach to their career, what kind of job they can do, what kind of facility, what kind of education they can do. And this remains the barrier when they are coming in Europe, either migrant or refugee. Europe is not taking them as a potential, unfortunately, and it's a reality. They are taking them, okay, we have a migrant and refugees woman, and how we can provide them basic facility, but not enhancing their potential. And they stuck in the limited dependency on their men. So this is very important when we are understanding, and to create more gender perspective, we need to enhance intersectional lens. And it's not happening. We see there are so many integration policy which is saying, oh, what you can do tomorrow. Obviously, tomorrow I can cook, I can deliver food, or I can become a receptionist, or I can go for a daycare for elderly. But I can't be a doctor, I can't be an engineer or researcher or judge, because it's required intense investment, and it requires time. Investment for me as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, so I can be independent in my choice. And this is not happening. So this is my complaint and frustration when it's come to Europe, because European countries is a developed countries, but coming from developing countries, I felt we are failing women. We are not giving them enough so they can dream, they can fly that dream. We are, on the name of culture, religion, or whatever, we are holding them back. So this is the main reason, if you ask me, and that's what we, as a migrant refugee-led organization, we are advocating for meaningful participation. We could have a seat on the table, and we can co-design the policy, the integration policy, not for the woman, for the society. Because Europe is our new home, and we really want to create a home inclusive and open and safe for everyone.
Excellent. Where do you see good practices, concrete examples that offer hope?
Oh, I wish I could bring few. I really wish, but still I will say, let's give a little bit credit. I admire what's happening in started happening in Europe. Like we have been engaged as a advisor with the European Commission, right? Is a good achievement which we already built. So we could have a discussion. We could understand how policies are working. So we could give them a reflection. But it's very slow procedure and it takes so much time, as I said. This is one practice I said we really need to create. And second, we say how we are giving the capacity building to the refugee or migrant or woman or color, different diverse group. But this capacity building also has to happen with the policymaker. So we are giving the training as a migrant-led organization, inviting them to give them training, how we can understand different culture, different perspective, and we can create some kind of a same understanding. This is not
Okay.
a bad. I know you want to cut my time. But I also talk. But I really feel this is the time because we already creating some kind of a ground where we are understanding, especially with this indication of this, the report is showing like if we invest in the migrant and in the community, we will get more. So I think this is the time where we can learn this, and I can make at least this indicator as kind of our set example, so we don't fall down. Yeah.
Thanks for your input, also your patience with time management. Turning to you, Miltos. Now, at the Fundamental Rights Agency, you monitor, among many other things that you do, the compliance of member states with EU equal rights and anti-discrimination legislation, including in the context of migration policies. How do you look from that perspective to MIPEX?
Thank you, Ali. I think we have plenty of time, Anila, so you can. So I'm going to benefit of that and take advantage.
Now, you're not a woman migrant, so I am going to cut you.
Yes, but I'm offering you gender balance on this part.
There you go.
So, one point, I have been doing the MIPEX as a national expert 20 years ago, Thomas Isabelle Hein. So this is a very valuable tool, as also the Commission knows and the bodies know very well, the Parliament, because it gives great insights about the structure and process indicators for human rights, for the realization, in this case, of integration policies, about what is actually offered, provided by the member states that do have the competence, but they also have the duty, according to the treaty, to coordinate for integration policy, so we don't have mismatch there. We, on the other side, the European Union Fundamental Rights Agency, we do research on the reality on the ground, especially on outcome indicators, on the life experiences of people. And in this sense, we can complete the picture, the mosaic. For example, you asked about discrimination, exactly because this is what we do. We do explore, we do collect data about the obligations of member states when they implement EU law. So in this case, discrimination, which is a very hard part of European primary and secondary legislation. So in this case, this is a very strong indicator for MIPEX. What do we find through our research? First of all, let me clarify that for what concerns migration, we do surveys on specific ethnic groups, not generally on migrants or people with migrant background, which gives insights exactly because MIPEX inevitably offers an average of the situation, but how this disaggregates then in gender, age, ethnic minority belonging, etc. And what we do find is very high percentages, very high rates of discrimination experiences. And we try to explain why, disaggregating the data. So in a way, apparently, prima facie, contradicts the MIPEX results, but it doesn't. What we find also is that some groups suffer more than others. The gender gap in experiences, the gender perspective is a strong predictor for victimization. I could not repeat this too many times, Anila, you are so right. The young people suffer more, but there are also those who feel more the sense of belonging, a part of the community. And also we see that the migrants with more fluency in national language report more discrimination. How come? In our surveys, because they claim their right, they're aware. So in a way, when we see high percentage of discrimination, we don't say, oh, here you have just, it's a complex phenomenon. It's also about the claim. It's, in a way, it is a potential of discrimination policy. We, as European Union, rightfully so, and very well done, we have improved, we have a very strong anti-discrimination legislation. This is a tool, this is a promise. This is a promise for migrants that want to be integrated. We see this also in other groups. For example, I'm managing the LGBTIQ survey. Same, trans people report more discrimination than before, but they participate more in, and they have more social acceptance. So this is an interesting element. And we also find that young people are those who are very vulnerable. They feel belonging, but they have a contradictory paradox of being disenfranchised. The gender gap, as I said, in many other experiences. And we have a very strong rise for migrants, but also for other groups in our surveys, of hate crime, hate speech and hate crime, which is, again, part of this paradox we are living, because we have, fortunately, on the planet, one of the European Union is a political entity that has a great context and a framework, legal framework, policy framework in place, but it is not implemented always perfectly. And we have a lot of worrying, alarming phenomena like the rise of hate crime and victimization. Why? We have also a very strong element of everybody lives, of disinformation, of weaponization of some groups, identity-based disinformation like against migrants or LGBTI and so on, that fuels hatred in society. So in a way creates this negative environment in which the integration policies, anti-discrimination policies need to be implemented.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I return to you, Tineke. We've touched on leadership, political leadership. We're all familiar with the fact we are having elections very soon in the Netherlands, where you are from. The fact that migration and asylum issues dominate political debates, yet we see regression in integration policies. What does need to change politically, and what political leadership is required to break the cycle?
First of all, really my apologies that I need to leave a bit earlier. It's not an indicator for that I don't find it interesting, but I just have to go to the Netherlands for another obligation. But although this, I don't feel it as an obligation. Yeah, what needs to be done? Maybe let me start first with the language and the framing of politicians, because I think even if you would have good policies on paper, if you are slammed every day with language bashing your identity or your background, it's not only, it must not only, undermine your own feeling of belonging, but it also has an impact on society itself, because people start to believe in that. For instance, if I think of the Netherlands, Muslims are a problem, or asylum seekers, they take away all the jobs or the houses or whatever. It really has a huge impact. And this is what I mean with political leadership. We really lack that a lot. There's no one who dares to say, look, listen to the real story. And we even need migrants. And many of the migrants are simply part of our society, and they have equal rights. And, I think especially populist politicians, they know exactly what they do. And this is really dividing societies, which is, of course, completely undermining the integration, even if you have them on paper. On the other hand, policies on paper, which are important, a legal position, as I said before, is key in order to be allowed to participate and to start integrating. But practice, implementation is also very important, because I'm a scholar myself, so I did more research also before. And then you really saw that if you do qualitative research and you look how things are implemented in practice, like much longer procedures, burdensome, bureaucratic steps, a lot of proof required for all kinds of things, which is so discouraging and makes people feel that they are treated as a kind of enemy, or that the policy is really aimed at discouraging you and not belonging or participating. So we should really also pay a lot more attention to that. And in that sense, at the EU level, I would say there's a big need for more enforcement of the policies. Like we have quite some good instruments, I would say, like the Family Unification Directive, the Long-Term Residence Directive, the Improved Single Permit Directive, all these kinds of things we could really help and facilitate migrants to be part of society and do their job, do what they want. But yeah, I mean, the Commission as guardian of the treaty is completely absent at the moment. I really, so it's not personal, huh? But it's a big frustration of me because if member states can simply violate the rules, what message do you send also to other member states? And you see this cascade of non-implementation. So I would say more enforcement. Don't leave it only to the Court of Justice or to national courts, but make sure that member states respect the rules. Don't try to reopen things that are good at the moment, because we see it with a long-term residence directive. The Commission really had a wonderful proposal, I must really say, really aiming at promoting integration. But what we see now, it's completely stalled because member states try to misuse it to water down the rights of third country nationals. Don't reopen instruments at the moment. Stay away from the Family Unification Directive, for instance, and let lawyers and judges do their work.
So you're saying because
but
of
look at the implementation.
Right, because of the political climate currently in Europe, it might be wise sometimes to not open certain files. Excellent. I'll give you the floor in a second, so you can, of course, respond. Here's the separation of the executive and the legislative powers in action. But first, I want to turn to Rita, Council of Europe, if that's okay. You've already mentioned quite inspiring examples of how integration can be approached, which are taking place at the local level. And how do we take that positive energy in order for national governments to apply it?
Yeah, thanks for the question, because indeed, ultimately integration happens locally. So what national governments can learn is to work together. So to treat local government as a partners, to see them as inspiration, to learn from the good practices. They can also learn that local governments need support, so give them the financial support, the legal framework, the open channels for communication and cooperation that they need to make effective integration policy. And they can also use the evidence of the results of the policies that local governments implement to prove the validity of integration and to take inspiration for them. So basically to see local governments as a partners, as a source of inspiration, and also as a source of evidence, if you want, of positive integration policies.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much. Aurlie, I'd like to give you the floor. The role of the, you see, I gave Rita the floor first, so you have more thinking time. Perhaps you can take into account some of the points that Tineke made in addressing the role of the European Commission in all of this.
Sure. I'm just noting that the last time I was in a panel and you were moderating, I already had a hard time. So I'm wondering if there's, yeah, just
blame the migrant, whatever.
Okay, and now I feel really bad. This is getting even worse. I will never ever sit in a panel is moderating ever again. Okay, I'm to respond to Tineke's comment. I'm going to give you the very bureaucratic reply, but that's exactly what we are doing. That we're really monitoring the situation very closely when it comes to the implementation of our legal migration acquis. so for example, for the family beneficiation, which falls within the remit of my sector, following this wave of national laws taken recently, we have been in contact with the member state authority. I was in a call this morning with one of them, and we're really, we're monitoring. And I see your point, but if there's, so for example, for the subsidiary protection, well, but you see,
No, that's a legal loophole. I
Briefly,
agree.
Tineke, yeah.
That's really difficult to do something with that as a commission. Then we should reopen the Family Unification Directive, which we should not do. So that's really a problem. But there are so many other issues, like that, dealing with the income requirement and the long waiting periods. And
yeah, but again, we really again on this, we are in contact with the national authorities, and we open infringement procedures when there's ground for it. And trust me, I used to be a DigiComp investigator, so I love opening infringements. So yeah, well, but okay, here again, but happy to discuss that later on at the Q&A. When it comes to what we can do, so we are really trying to, so as I said, we have only a support competence, but we're really trying to foster exchange of good practices and exchange of peer knowledge through our various networks. And we have a very strong network which gathers the member states integration authority that meets twice a year. And when it comes to the money, because that's also the second leg of our intervention, the financial support. You might have noticed that in the Commission's proposal for the next MFF, there has been a massive increase of the funds dedicated to home affairs and including for integration. But here it would be for the co-legislators to, follow the commission's lead on this one. So because, yeah, that's only our proposal. But again, also once approved, then the Commission will make sure that, or will aim at ensuring that there's an appropriate amount of funding dedicated to integration. Not only in the Home Affairs Fund, but also in the other funds, because if you look at the current situation, you see that so the AMIF, the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, looks at the early integration stages. So that circles back to our first round of questions. But you have also a lot of funds like the ESF Plus, for example, that looks at integration and inclusion on the longer run. And this will be maintained, in one way or another under the next MFF. Also, when you keep in mind the fact that in the Commission's proposal, you have an obligation of member states have an obligation of dedicating at least 14% of their funds to inter alia social inclusion actions, which means also social inclusion of migrants.
Thank you very much, Aurlie. Tineke, because you need to leave in not too long, how many minutes do you have? Oh, just 2. There you go. Now she's time managing us.
need to be concise,
Yeah,
right?
I'll give you the floor
Yeah.
to just give us. I will not ask a question from my own perspective. What is the one key point you'd like to leave us with before you head to your next obligation?
Well, maybe that we should not only look at integration as beneficial and necessary for the migrants. I think it's really key for the society as a whole. As you also said, that we have an inclusive society, and there also I miss a little bit the political leadership that this story is told and emphasized all the time. Of course, on the one hand, because of just simply look at the demographic changes and the shortages on the labor market, but that's very practical. If we want to make sure that we are, you know, societies as a whole, and we want to challenge all the geopolitical problems that we have, we need to stick together, and we will need all of us together. And this is what makes it so sad, that instead of that, we are just, you know, dividing society continuously, and that makes the challenges much harder than what actually how it could have been. So in that sense, also in talking about integration, it's a mutual beneficial process, and we are in desperate need of doing better than now.
Excellent. Tineke, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good trip back to the Netherlands. I want to move on to you, Miltos. Now, based on your long-standing experience, you have a long-standing experience in this field, as you have indicated right at the outset. We see backsliding, regression occurring. How can legal standards help us to improve and to turn the tide against this backsliding?
It's a bit what more people on this panel said. We need to walk the talk, and we need to go to implementation with the different capacities. It's not straightforward. We have a very difficult context, global, not just European, but we have to see clearly the data. We have to understand clearly the possibilities, opportunities, the legal aspects on how to move. For example, you see now how EU institutions try to bring this forward. But in my opinion, we stand at the crossroads, in a very particular crossroads, in this specific context, which is global, as I said again, but we see in our societies. Tineke said very well from political perspective. More categories of people being in this room and regarding integration and other policies have to take a very specific step ahead. And from politicians, duty bearers in member states, different levels, local level, national level, they have to do their job. For example, from my perspective, anti-discrimination, the equality bodies have now new tools, the new directive, to move forward and improve reporting of discrimination, because people do not report discrimination. But we have a great potential in belonging, trust in institutions, despite the situation. We need to stick together, because we have these specific challenges ahead that we need to build on what we have. In my opinion, this is a critical and defining moment, because it happens, fortunately, when we have a very strong legal and cultural structure, let's say, in the European Union, and we need to build on that with a specific focus on the real issues and invest, in my opinion, very strongly. I don't say that verbally, invest to women and to young people who now are exactly in the borderline. While they want to be integrated, they want to be part of the society, they want to be more active and participating, they are also targeted by different phenomena and difficulties. This is a very big discussion. If you leave me with the microphone, I will continue for long.
Hopefully we'll have more space later on when you bring to the floor your input. Your questions, your thoughts will be welcomed also for those online right after my next question and answer from Anila. Anila, you are from the Netherlands very soon. As I said, there will be elections there. We've already touched on the fact that we could have fantastic policies, but we also need the political leadership and the political context in order to make the good policies stay and the bad policies go out. And for that, we need somehow to combat the securitization and the weaponization of the migration issue. What do you recommend to politicians? What language should they speak?
I think we really need to understand, as a politician, if I'm a politics person, which I'm not, but still, because policy is important for us as a politician or as a citizen or as a migrant or as refugee. We really need to understand how to talk about my power, my position, and to talk about how I, as a politician, when I'm talking about it, why I look down upon to the certain categories of the citizen. We should talk about us as us. we shouldn't use still us and them, which is still happening, especially in Netherlands. We are taking, I myself are Dutch, and I always say I feels very proud Dutch, though I don't speak Dutch, so don't hate me for that. But I feel Dutchness in me because I am very direct, as you can see. I know I'm on time. I was here even at 1 p.m. But the thing is, as a politician, especially, I don't know how much should I say it, but it's like white privilege is unfortunately is still there. When we are talking about the integration, we are not talking about inclusion. When we are talking about policy, we are not talking about belonging. When we are talking about position, we are not talking how we reshift the power dynamic, how we can open up the safe and brave spaces for more participation. Participation is such kind of a expensive tool. Trust me, from last almost 1 decade, I am advocating for meaningful participation, and I said it's becoming still like a just like a token. It's not easy. And second, we really need to simplify, make a humanization when we are talking about the narratives. You and all of you even mentioned few things which I don't know, and I will go and check what those indicators, what articles you mentioned, like how we as a migrant representative, we could argue, we could negotiate. So this is main gap. When we are talking about my life as a woman, I have my life, my education, my children, and now we really need to say, then we're talking about the housing, then we need to talk about the education right, then we need to talk about the detention center, then we need to talk about the mental health, when we really need to talk about how we get more independent financial resources for women by women. This is, no one is talking about how we can bring. And lastly, I will want to touch upon this. Recently we are start working on the climate justice, and few people came to us, oh, why you are migrant-led, refugee-led, why you are talking about climate justice? And for me it's like, but we are living in this earth belongs to everyone. So this is a problem. This is assumption the migrant can do this or can't do this is be defined by the policy. This is the wrong assumption. So we really need to readjust and reclaim how we are making the policy and who has the power to make this policy to open up the spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking of opening up spaces, please raise your hand if you wish to contribute. Let's start with the lady over there and then move down.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much. I'm Abby Goldfarb from the Migration Policy Institute. All of your insights were very valuable. I just had a question on something that came up, I think, a few times in the panel, which is really integration happening at the local level and the role of cities and municipalities. I think is something that's increasingly recognized as important, particularly in Europe. My question is more so on the evidence side, which I think, Rita, is something you mentioned in terms of data availability and insights into how these policies play out at the local level and capturing these indicators to inform policies at the municipal and local level in cities. Do you think that visibility is there? Are there any promising practices in terms of getting this evidence from cities who are really on the ground implementing policies and serving as the bridge between regional or national policies? And
I'm assuming this one's for Rita, yeah?
Yes, I'd say, or anyone.
Rita, could you take this one briefly and then I move to the next one? Thank you for your question.
Yeah, in terms of evidence and data in the Intercultural Cities Network, which is a network of about 170 cities that implement the intercultural inclusion approach and learn from each other. We use a tool that we call Index. It's basically a long questionnaire that the cities can do at the beginning of their journey with us to see how they score, how they perform across all policy areas in terms of intercultural inclusion. And this help them measure progress over time. They help them seeing where they're performing better or less so. And as it's been done for almost 20 years now for so many cities, by some of them also repeatedly, where good practices have been identified, they can feed as examples or inspiration into the planning and the policy making or strategy making of cities in areas where they perform less well. Like the MIPEX, this is also kind of policy inputs focused index. So they look whether they have these policies, which characteristics these policies have, less so about the output. So how does it play out? Of course, cities, we also encourage them to have a quality data collection. We provide them with tools so cities can themselves individually also look at the output level, how this plays out. Then we have anecdotal evidence of the cities that feel proud of their diversity, that feel proud of being a welcoming city, do feel more secure. But there is also not so recent now studies from MPG, by the way, on how intercultural cities scored, and overall there's a positive correlation between intercultural inclusion and a sense of security and well-being by citizens was noticed. This is not recent. I think it was 2017. We count on looking into that.
Excellent. Thank you for your question. Yes, I think there was another hand that went up first. Yeah, the lady on the 1, 2, 3, 5th row, please. 4th. Apologies.
Hello, and thank you very much, everyone. I have two different questions. One is for Monsieur Miltos. I would like to ask, since you said that you have evidence like life experience indicators about anti-discrimination, and I would like to ask if people reported their discrimination, because maybe sometimes because you said about young people or people, they don't understand that they have this right, or they are being discriminated, how people report their discrimination, and if they report that they've been discriminated. And if there is an education on their rights, or yes. And another question is for Madame Rita. If also in your practices there are involved the undocumented migrants, if there is in the provisions the undocumented migrants.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
I'll take the question for Miltos.
Very fast. I think I mentioned it. Yes, people do not report discrimination usually. They don't do so because they don't believe that something will happen. Having been myself investigator on the discrimination equality body long ago, I can tell you that this is rightly so, because people would like things to be restored, not necessarily to go after a procedure. So it is a lot about what the equality body in each country does. So that's why I said it's now the ball is in the field of the equality bodies. They have to reach out, they have to cooperate with the migrant organizations to see how this can improve. But it's also the data we collect also show that people are more aware about the right. In fact, we ask them also if they're aware of the equality bodies, and they are not only aware of very high rates, they also trust the equality bodies. They just don't believe they're so powerful. So it is something that can be done. It's a potential, let's say. It's not necessarily a negative element itself, and awareness is there. We don't ask about specific education, we ask about awareness.
Rita, I believe the answer is yes. In your case, undocumented migrants are taken into account in your work?
Yeah, I can reply with a kind of two levels of focus. One as kind of from the intercultural inclusion approach, the work of intercultural cities, and how we've been implementing this project, this approach. It was designed originally for migrants, piloted in 2008 with few cities and now grew, but it's been increasingly seen as applicable and also useful directly or indirectly to all groups. When an authority implements inclusive policies, it benefits the entire society, but it also benefits all other groups that are more frequently, and we see it in practice. We see cities that really take the tools that we have developed on anti-rumors, for example, that were developed for migrants to counter stereotypes about migrants, and they're really used for Roma inclusion. They are used for for LGBTI inclusion in different settings, in work setting, or so it's diversity in general. With the intercultural inclusion approach, we just try to make diversity as seen as and managed as an asset. From a kind of a broader organizational perspective, Council of Europe is in the business of promoting human rights, democracy. Its most known body is the European Court of Human Rights, and that applies to no matter who is on the territory of a state. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for your question. I'll take a question from the online audience before returning to the room. I'll take several ones from the room, and this one is for you, Aurlie. Now, Mr. Brunner, and we'll be listening to him after the break, as you said, calls MIPEX the golden standard. Can you concretely illustrate how your work benefits from MIPEX?
I can't give you a very concrete example, but as you know, we now have to, we are now in contact with the member states when it comes to the implementation of the pact. And obviously, we also kind of base our preliminary assessment, or when we start our preliminary assessment of the situation in the member states, obviously we use data from MIPEX to form this preliminary assessment. The same goes when we, I'm really taking short by this question, because it's such something that we do without even thinking about it. Just something that it's our bread and butter to, when we start working on something, obviously we look at MIPEX indicators, obviously we look at the settling in report. I'm thinking, for example, about the other work we are doing now on labor market integration and attracting and retaining talents. Obviously, when we start our thinking, we base ourselves on data, on indicators coming from MIPEX, coming again from the settling in report. So yes,
it is one of the most important documents that informs your work.
That's really something, again, that it's bread and butter, and we use it without even thinking about it, because it's so obvious that we just do it as an automatism.
Brilliant. I have space for two more questions, and I apologize for those who will not have the floor this time, but in the next panel, we'll have even more time to discuss. In this case, I'll move to this side of the room. Let me see. Yeah, the two of you, both of you, go ahead.
You go first.
Oh, thank you. What a gentleman. My name is Paula Alvarez from the International Organization for Migration. Thanks for the insights. There was a reference to the next multi-annual financial framework and the 14% target. Do you see any risks that EU member states in the current context in the national and regional partnership plans do not prioritize integration, even in this 14% allocation? I understand that there's also flexibility with due justification to shift allocations across policy priorities. And in that case, if there is that risk, what can be done to mitigate that?
I'm assuming this is for Aurlie, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Already.
Yes, thank you. We talked a lot about sort of what leads to better integration, and also wondering, what does good integration itself lead to? Do we have any data on sort of whether it, for example, lowers far-right populism? Does it lower sort of negative feelings about immigrants, so that we can maybe also sort of make the case for why that is a good thing?
Excellent. Thank you very much. And once more, apologies to the others who wished to speak. You'll have more space in the next panel. Beatrice, why am I saying Beatrice? Aurélie, very briefly response to that question on funding.
I think the as I said, the Commission will aim at ensuring that within this 14%, there's, funds used for integration. And I think even if member states want to deviate from that, we have a very strong legal framework in place when it comes to the pact. And again, I really want to strongly disagree when people say that integration is overlooked in the pact. Integration is basically all over the pact. Whatever, whatever you look at, secondary movement, qualification regulation, reception condition directive, solidarity, the answer is integration. And I'm very convinced that in the upcoming migration strategy, integration will feature prominently. And therefore, even if some member states would want to deviate from this 14%, integration is so all over the place that I think they won't have such a big margin of maneuver.
Thank you very much. Now that question on, let's say, the overall societal positive externalities of good integration. Anyone on the panel, or perhaps Başak, what are good places to look for data on that?
Question though, my answer will not about the data, but this question about how we make an indicator for integration to do the analysis. For us, it's very important because so far there is no written rule how we make a integration analysis. But unwritten rules, do you speak local language? Because we need to integrate in the society, and do you have a work, a job, so you can live? So these are two unwritten indicator is so far it been used to assume or to say I am integrated, right? As a migrant, as a newcomer. But for me, this is really a problem of indicators. Second problem, I will say, is like who has the power to do the analysis and how they present and where they present analysis. I really want to acknowledge in 2019 when I was part of advisory board with Urban Agenda, we did a research, ask the people, it's still online, you can see, and how we all refugee and migrant coming from all the different parts of European, we co-designed the questionnaire, we did the participatory approach with the application with the research, and we presented. But unfortunately, what happens till today when migrant-led or refugee-led or newcomer, they produce this kind of research, it's never been taken into account. So this is also a problem, how these national agencies like EUA agencies are a big element of the research. We have European Commission research data, all they have their own offices or their department who are doing these studies, but they are not counting the account of how we can involve migrant or refugees voices into, or how we can account and create a credibility to their research. So this is the missing. I don't know if, but I really felt the need is not about only research, but inclusive research. This is missing.
Thank you very much. Very well formulated. I suggested the gentleman perhaps approach Başak during the break. I'm sure she can point out where, if the data exists, you can find it. We'll have a break with coffee and further chatting. Please be back in the room in 20 minutes, but not before you join me in thanking Miltos, Rita, Anila, and Aurlie. and networking moment. When you are ready, we kindly invite you to come back to the plenary room so we can continue the conversation. Thank you very much. All right, so we are about to start in perhaps 1 minute. So if you are not seated yet, I kindly invite you to take your seats. Thank you very much. May I ask the members of the panel to please come forward and take their seats as the final few of you return from the coffee break and make themselves comfortable. So the speakers, please come forward and take your seats. Excellent, thank you. So I have been told, but I don't promise anything, that the video of Mr. Brunner will be working now without any speech impediments. Here it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me congratulate all of the teams who have made this year's Migrant Integration Policy Index a reality. 167 indicators in 8 policy domains, multiplied by 56 countries, all raised to the power of the highest standards in data science. When you solve that equation, the answer is a lot of hard work to produce the most reliable tool of its kind anywhere in the world. So thank you for creating this gold standard. I'm proud that we are able to support your important work with EU funding under Horizon 2020. The data you create is the first step in crafting policies to improve integration. It shows us where we must direct our efforts in the coming years to continue the work we have set out in the action plan for migrant integration and, of course, also in the Pact for Migration and Asylum. There is still a lot of work to do. We see diverging integration results across member states and an increasing tension towards migrants in some political corners that shows in the results of the new MIPEX. Against this backdrop, finding sensible policies to foster better migrant integration is more important than ever. Well-integrated migrants as part of a well-regulated system of migration can contribute to economic growth and reinforce the cohesion of our societies. This is the Europe we want to build. So enjoy the conference. I wish you fruitful discussions and, of course, a good start on the MIPEX 2030.
An applause, yes. I thank the commissioner and thank all of you for coming back to the room, refreshed, energized, and hopefully focused for our next. This one for a bit until you work on the other microphone. So this session is slightly longer than the other one, and it's titled Policy Exchange, Learning from Exemplary Reforms and Setbacks. Now, change of integration policy along a number of key dimensions is what we will be looking at. Think of access to nationality, political participation, labor mobility, education, and anti-discrimination. And we'll zoom in at experiences in these fields of a number of countries. And we'll have experts who know these countries talk about it, which will highlight how the MIPEX method enables comparison and helps feed in good practices into integration policies. The format is as follows. I'll have, like the previous panel, 2 rounds of questions, and then we'll open the floor for all of you. If you are online, please contribute your questions over the chat. And if you're here, it's the old-fashioned way, raising the hand and getting a microphone. Let me introduce you to the speakers. Sitting immediately next to me is the former High Commissioner for Migration in Portugal, and she's a migration specialist. That's not something that she is former in, continues to be. Sonia Pereira, please welcome her. We have the head of unit at the Office of the Federal Government Commissioner for Migration, Refugees and Integration in Germany, Thilo Scholle. Then, coming from the Center of Migration Research at the University of Warsaw, Poland, Renata Stefianska. And joining us online, I welcome both of them. I first introduce you to the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Justice, Home Affairs and Migration in Ireland, Donncha O'Sullivan. And last but not least, from the Barcelona Center for International Affairs, joining us from Barcelona, I'm assuming, Francesco Passetti.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. Glad you could make it online. I'll start with you, Sonia, if that is okay. As I think Başak already mentioned, Portugal moved from being, let's say, having an average score for integration policies to being a leader in integration policies. Can you tell us about this journey? How did you get from lagging behind to moving forward? And give us some concrete examples as to improvements. Yeah, this gives me the power to moderate. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. Well, indeed, Portugal has developed a migration policy that has included a strong commitment to policy development in integration and also in the adoption of integration measures. As you are probably well aware, Portugal started in this field in the late 1990s, early 2000s, as also the migration flows to Portugal increased and diversified, and they continue to do so until today. So some important key points in this policy development. Since the end of the 1990s, Portugal adopted an institutional figure with the mandate of developing and implementing policies in the migration integration field, which was the High Commission for Migration. It had different designations and mandate over the years, but it had this specific field, promoting human rights migrant integration. And these, the activities of the High Commission for Migration included some flagship initiatives like the one-stop shop for migrants with its multiple services, the National Center for Migrant Integration, and also their local level replicas, the local centers for migrant integration. There's also been an adoption of strategic migration plans with a strong focus on integration measures since 2007, and the last one was adopted in 2019, and it reflected Portugal's commitment with the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Overall, the country has developed this commitment and based on the idea of whole of government and whole of society approach through close coordination of policy making between central administration, local level authorities, and also civil society, and a very important role that was given to also enabling the participation of migrants associations. An important body was also the Migration Observatory that over the years has produced regular statistics on migrant integration and also included an annual report in this domain since 2016. Very importantly, and also looking at also what MIPEX evaluates, the legislation. Over the years, this has also developed towards enabling better access to citizenship and also better access to family reunification. The current version of the law, which is about to change, there is a proposal already for change, allows immigrants with 5 years of legal residence in the country to apply for citizenship, and also children born in Portugal of foreign parents can also access legal residence, or if the parents have at least 1 year of residence in the country, regardless of the status. For family reunification, there's a need to have a stable residence title in the country to apply, and also the possibility, as Başak mentioned earlier, to apply also if you are already in Portugal, so that the family can move together and then apply for residence permit already in Portugal. This was seen as a very positive contribution to the process of promoting migrant integration and was assumed as a political commitment within the migration policy. And just to finalize, I also wanted to pinpoint the anti-discrimination. This is an area also where Portugal has evolved with the adoption of a specific commission for fighting ethnic and racial discrimination. This was an equality body that was in place, was revised in 2023. There was also a national plan against racism 2021 and 2025. And an annual report was produced on the situation of ethnic and racial discrimination annually until 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for your excellent overview and also for being mindful of the time, in the interest of having space for your input later on. Thilo, I'd like to move to you. Now, recently, if I'm not mistaken, Germany has changed its citizenship law, and that led to an improved score in the MIPEX index. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, of course. So citizenship requirements have been a rather hot topic in German politics for quite some time. And it has two sides to it. One is the acceptance of dual citizenship, which is has been always been in a sense controversial. And the other hand, obviously, is the question how long you have to be in the country in order to be able to apply for citizenship. And in the past legislature, there have been two major changes adopted. One was the general acceptance of dual citizenship. So before it was more or less for European countries, as well as for countries who do not let anybody out of their citizenship. So that was already accepted for dual citizenship, or maybe more than just two citizenships. And now dual citizenship, at least, is generally accepted. So that was the one leg, and the other was to reduce the time, as already mentioned. You need to be legally in the country from 8 years to 5 years. And that was another major improvement on that. And yeah, so that was one of the few things one could maybe a little bit ironically say that the previous coalition government was able to agree upon anonymously, almost, to do those two improvements.
Right. Now, can you tell us a little more about the process that led to these improvements? Did research come into play, or was it a purely political decision?
Well, I mean, it's the general question, how much research is really moving integration policy at all? One could say sometimes a little bit skeptically, since there's maybe integration policy is one of the fields of politics that is sometimes seems to be detached from empirical evidence and seem to be very far away from empirical evidence in a not very helpful manner, as to say. So because it's one of the questions that many people think to have their own anecdotal evidence they can draw from, and then start from there with their policy development. But obviously, in our view, the evidence suggests that the citizenship is one of the very great incentives for integration as well. So when we talk about international migration of people who want to work in Germany, so to have an easier access to citizenship is one of the assets the country can offer in order to compete for, let's say, international talents as well. So that is one of the aspects where maybe research and policy debate really gave some grounding to it. Yeah.
When you saw your score go up in MIPEX, was there a little celebration at your office?
Yes, I mean, that was. I mean,
that's a very hesitant yes, Thilo.
I have to. I mean, there's one good enough that the score is from 2024. So because we have to see how that will turn out, since there is a debate on the citizenship law that might be even this week. I'm not sure. It's in Parliament. It's not yet decided upon, which is not on the 8 year, on the reduction to 5 years. It's not on the dual citizenship, but it's on another improvement that has been made, or change that had been made by the previous government, that was to, in some cases, even give access to the citizenship after 3 years.
Right.
And that has been, yes, for high school, you have to have a C1 German knowledge and all that. So it's a it's a rather small group maybe of people that are able to do that in 3 years, to speak German in that way. So that will be repelled eventually, I suppose, since it's in the coalition agreement, and the change in the code is already proposed. But yes, so.
Excellent. I'm sure Başak and her team will be keeping a close eye. Moving to you, Francesco, from Barcelona. How's the weather in Barcelona?
It was nice, sunny.
It's sunny. This was the sound check. Thanks for joining us, Francesco. Now, Spain managed, I think maybe we put my volume down just a bit. I think the sound quality will be better. Spain improved its MIPEX score as a result of better anti-discrimination legislation a few years back. Can you tell us about that change and how you made it happen? Not
Yeah,
you
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, it was 2022 when it was approved the latest reform on anti-discrimination with the law on equal treatment and non-discrimination. I think it represented an important step in the fight against discrimination. And probably I would stress three main reasons why this reform was important. The first one is in normative terms, in the sense that the law fills a major gap in the country's anti-discrimination framework, which until that year, 2022, lacked a comprehensive law covering all forms of discrimination. So basically, with the new law, Spain has today one of the most advanced legal systems in the European Union when it comes to protect people from discrimination. As testified by MIPEX score. The second point, I think that it's important because, better said, for equality and integration, so referring more closely to the very content of the reform, because the law broadens the definition of discrimination, covers more areas of life, and strengthens the role of the national equality body. And I would add that a special relevant aspect is that the laws formally recognize structural discrimination and structural racism in Article 36 and 40, which helps shifting the conversation from individual cases and individual issues to a systematic matter of structural discrimination. And I think that that's a big step forward in building a more inclusive society. And last but not least, I think that it's very important at a political level, so in terms of politics, because the law shows that the Spanish government is serious about fighting discrimination and racism, which are very complex and sensitive issue nowadays in Spain, as the recent dramatic facts in this July in Torre Pacheco testify, but also beyond Spain, unfortunately, in Europe and in the rest of the world. So I think that having a strong legislation in place is a clear sign of commitment.
Can I just ask you, perhaps out of personal curiosity, Francesco, now in a sense, when it comes to anti-discrimination, you are lucky at this moment in Spain, given your national government. But if the political tide changes in Spain, is there a risk that these excellent laws will be changed?
That's the big question nowadays in Spain. I would say that the public feeling about the issue of migrant integration, anti-discrimination, and anti-racism is so embedded and in the Spanish culture and civil society that I wouldn't be much afraid about a legal change, at least in the short term, but there might be, of course, a relevant practical change in terms of what is the reality, what is the practice of everyday life of social cohesion and coexistence. So even if there won't be a change in legal terms, that might be a crucial worsening of the situation in day-to-day life.
Thank you for that answer. We must stay vigilant indeed. Turning to you, Renata, the Center of Migration Research in Warsaw. Now, the arrival of refugees from Ukraine had an impact, obviously, on integration policies that perhaps went beyond people under temporary protection. How did that group benefit from such changes?
Thank you for this very good question, because indeed the arrival of large number of first of all, made Ukrainian children, but all foreign children also, more visible in Polish schools. And this led to many important changes in policy, which benefited also other children, not only Ukrainian children. So currently, about 5% of pupils in Polish schools are foreigners. Most of them are, of course, Ukrainians and Ukrainian refugee children, but also from other countries. And in 67% of Polish schools, foreigners are present. So previously, they were mainly present in schools in large cities. Now, all over the country. And of course, as I said, it led to very important changes because solutions were needed. And maybe I will tell you about, I will illustrate it with a recent program that was designed with Ukrainian children in mind, but is in fact targeted at all pupils. So this is a friendly school program, which consists of 3 parts. One of them is hiring intercultural assistants in Polish schools. Such possibility now Polish schools have such a possibility. Also, trainings can be organized for teachers, but also other educational staff that deals with the children with migration background. And what is very important, dedicated funds were allocated for this purpose, because of course it was possible also before, but school administration had to think and how they can finance this, and it was really difficult. Of course, it's not mandatory. However, there are funds available, and they can use it. Also, because so many more children are present in Polish schools. Schools learned that, for example, they can organize preparatory classes, that is welcome classes, that they can organize additional Polish language classes. Before the arrival of Ukrainian children, probably only schools in large cities were aware of these regulations, but now it's the issue is so salient that it's changed in the whole Poland.
Right. Thanks so far for your excellent overview. Donica, moving to you, and thank you for your patience. How are you doing, Donica?
I'm doing very well, Ali. I'm sorry I can't join you in Brussels, particularly for the reception. I will have a small glass of wine here in solidarity with you all later on this evening. So look forward to that.
Excellent. We'll be keeping the camera on you during the reception. Donica, my question to you is a sort of an offshoot of my question to Renata, because in Ireland, there were also arrivals from Ukraine, although in smaller numbers, and that had an impact on policy overall. Could you tell us about perhaps positive impacts on policies towards people in vulnerable situations, apart from those under temporary protection?
Absolutely. And yes, I can see a lot of echoes in the presentation Renata made. Certainly the number of people arriving, fleeing the war and who arrived in Ireland is large by Irish standards, and certainly presented considerable logistical challenges for many aspects of our public services. I think the underlying approach in terms of our policy didn't change. It's always been the government's policy to work towards building a society that is diverse, is inclusive, where everyone can make a contribution and thrive, and where the vulnerable are looked after. But it's also always been recognised that there will be situations where we need targeted supports to help people for whom the mainstream services aren't accessible. And that certainly was the case in the Ukraine experience. I'm very much impacted by the discussion in the earlier panel about the value of local action. Yes, local government action, but also local voluntary action. And there was a considerable emergence of voluntary local support and empathy for arrivals from Ukraine, which was really, really impactful and powerful. And I suppose the key things that the government has been doing has been to try to empower local government to build on that, to try and help in terms of integrating people and the challenges that they face. We have a lot of similarity in the sort of issues we've had to address to the ones addressed by Renata. Similarly, in the education space, we established regional education and language teams, initially with a mandate around Ukrainian arrivals, people benefiting from temporary protection, but expanded at the end of 2022 to everyone in the international protection process. And those teams look to navigate the education system for people who aren't familiar with it. And then, of course, help provide additional special supports around language, special needs, the consequences of trauma. And I suppose what we learned from this is that not only does this allow children get on and thrive in school, and many are doing that, but they're also an important way to integrate the whole family into the community, because particularly in regional parts of Ireland, the local school is a hugely important centre for cultural life, for sporting life, for community supports. By bringing kids in, the parents come in as well. So that's been successful and something we're learning from. Another similar area is where we've invested in additional supports to an existing structure, which we have for children's and young people activity, again, at a regional level. We've put additional funding into that, not huge money, but sometimes the amounts of money don't need to be huge. And again, provide supports for people living in international protection accommodation centres, young people, helping them maybe address trauma, but also very often simply helping them to connect with local sports, outdoor activities, allowing them to take a part of society and also get on with their lives. The final area I mentioned, I think, is probably the most important one, and it builds on the discussion in the earlier panel about local government. From the centre of government, we have specifically funded local authority integration teams in each council in the country. So we employ people who are trained to actually help to coordinate supports, yes, to people fleeing from temporary protection from Ukraine, but also international protection and effectively broader migration needs as well. All the things I'm describing, these are things that have really emerged in the last few years, and clearly we need to take stock of what kind of impact they're having and learn and adjust on them. But I think it's been really interesting to hear from some of the other presentations today that I guess many of these things are kind of in the same direction and on the same page as some of our colleagues across Europe. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Duncan. Renata, I'd like to turn to you. We've touched on the topic of political participation. There have been some developments in Poland as to involving newcomers in policy and in politics. What are some of the achievements and challenges in that field?
Well, the score of Poland is still not very high, but we could see some improvements. For example, with the increased number of migrants in Poland, there are more migrant-led organizations which are very active and more often invited to consult different political documents, also legal regulations, both at the local and national level. For example, I think that all political documents regarding migration as well as legislation are consulted with especially migrant organizations, maybe not individual migrants, but migrant-led organizations, but also public hearings have been organized recently to discuss these issues, and it looks good. However, I think that participants of these consultations often complain that what they say is not then really taken into account, because often these consultations are organized only after political documents or regulations are drafted, so at the very last stage before adopting these policies or documents. However, structural barriers for political participation still exist. For example, in Poland, foreigners do not have voting rights, even in local elections, of course, apart from EU citizens, but even in EU citizens, differently in other EU countries, do not have the right to establish or even join political parties. And it will probably not be changed in the near future due to political climate, but also because probably the Polish constitution would have to be changed, because this is how it is regulated. And I think that another challenge is also, I think that also in line with the results of MIPEX for other countries, that the situation with obtaining Polish citizenship is worsening because currently the government increased the fees for naturalization, and it was a really huge increase several times. These fees were increased several times, and also there are proposals to increase the residence period required for naturalization from 3 years to even 10. However, to finish this not so pessimistically, growing numbers of foreigners naturalize in Poland, especially in the last couple of years, which means that more and more people with migrant background will have a direct influence on political life in Poland.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn to you, Thilo. Can you tell us about participation of migrants in Germany? Are you undertaking any initiatives in that field?
Yes, that's a very important issue, especially for the commissioner as well. So we have several projects that we are funding that, for example, try to bring young people whose parents maybe have migrated to Germany closer to political engagement. So to help them to internships in the political field and political administration, for example. That is one issue. We have regular consultations with migrant organizations on various fields. And participation is one of them. And we have several, let's say, legal consultative bodies at the state level. So, for example, when we had the state election, the local elections in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia last week, there were as well the elections of the consultative local bodies for migrants. So those are maybe examples for that. And we have maybe 2 points that we have in our own integration report. The number of members of parliament with a migration background is on the rise. So it is still not representative if you take the overall number, but it has been risen over the past years, and political participation as well. So if there are surveys on turnout at elections, migrants still have a lower score of turnout than people without a migration background. So that is maybe one interesting argument when talking about citizenship, since always one argument might be to say citizenship, the incentive of becoming a citizen is the incentive of being able to vote. So that shows you that there's more to wanting to vote and more of feeling, let's say, at home in a certain way, even in a political sense. But so maybe those few observations.
My next question to you, Thilo, very quick, is you've already touched on it, your integration policies for people that are highly skilled. This is not measured by MIPEX, but still very important. Can you tell us about it? How does the policy look like, and what has the impact been so far?
Well, to really measure the impact is maybe a little bit early, since we had 2 large packages, one could say, of legal reform, one in 2020, which then COVID kicked in. So that's kind of stopped the movement and the momentum of the change, one might say, and then one package in 2023. And so for example, one thing that we would maybe look at, is the digitalization process digitalization is a very difficult issue in Germany since the overall question of how governmental agencies are digitalized, services are digitalized is let's say has a rather mixed result. But in terms of migration administration, we think we have made a large step forward. For example, with the possibility to to apply for visa on a digital way, pretty much from any country, to digitalize the process of the acceptance of diplomas from abroad, which is a very hot topic for high skilled migration
in all of the EU.
In all of the EU, and in Germany as a second issue with the vocational training and the dual system of in vocational training, which is another issue that's more difficult. But yes, so those are maybe two points. And the last point in this is that even the employer in Germany can start this process for very high skilled migrant workers, and the local foreigners office has to assist the company in the whole process of applying both for the visa, but as well in the process of recognition of the diploma. And so to, let's say, to get a little closer to a one-stop approach to migration and to skilled migration.
Right. Thanks for that. I want to go back to you, Francesco. Now, the fact that Spain has excellent policies in the field of employment for migrants, can you tell us about it?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Spain has indeed developed several target employment policy in recent year, especially in the context of programs of circular temporary migration. One example is the Wafira project, which has supported the circular and migration and empowerment of Moroccan women working in agriculture. There are also broader bilateral agreements and programs with countries like Senegal. These initiatives are innovative, but they remain to a sort of small scale and scope. So maybe it's better to highlight what I consider more significant good practice as regards labor market, but which I think affect broadly the integration processes in plural. That is the reform of the Spain immigration regulation that was enacted in May of this year. So wasn't covered by MIPEX, but I think it's worth to be mentioned for at least two main reasons related to two important policy changes. The first one is that this reform strengthening the legal and safe pathway for labor migration. On the one hand, expanding the access to work visas, especially in sectors facing labor shortages in the country. And on the other hand, it also facilitates the hiring of foreign students, making also easier for them the transition into the labor market and the changing of residence permit. And the other big change brought about by this reform, probably most importantly, is the reform of the Arraigo system. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Arraigo system in Spain. It is basically a key structural mechanism for regularizing undocumented migrants based on their social, family, or labor ties in Spain. And in this regard, the reform reduced the requirements that migrant needs to meet to apply for regularization. For instance, the time of residence, irregular, so to say, residence in the countries is reduced from 3 to 2 years. And also, this new reform introduced new categories of Arraigo, like the Arraigo training or Arraigo for training, which allows migrants to regularize their status by completing accredited training programs. Or another important category is the second chance Arraigo, as it is called in new legislation, which is designed for those people whose residence permit have expired and have in this way the chance to get regularized. So I think that these changes are expected to bring many migrants out of the informal economy by granting them legal work authorization more quickly. And this in turn should improve job stability, access to right, and their opportunities for upskilling. As I was said at the beginning, this was not covered by this last wave of MIPEX core, but we have already seen positive results for a previous reform, which did the first liberalization of the Arrigo system in 2022, which, yes, was covered by MIPEX. And we have some important results regarding this former reform. After 1 year, the number of initial resident permits granted through the Arrigo system almost doubled. The average time migrants spent in irregular status dropped from 3.5 years to 2.8, which is also a significant improvement. And also the social security affiliation among holders of this kind of permits rose by 70%. So I think that this is important to stress that integration policies are not only beneficial and for individual migrants to improve their protection, but also to improve the welfare system of the host country. I think that is an argument we often forget to mention. The real challenge for the coming future is, of course, the implementation of this reform, because Spain, like many other countries, often struggle with the gap between policy on paper and policy in practice. But probably this is a topic we can explore further in the Q&A session.
Excellent, and thanks for being mindful of the time. Thank you. I'd like to turn to you, Sonia. Now, important changes are going on in Portugal with regards to integration policies. Can you briefly touch on those and tell us what should we expect, what should we anticipate in terms of the challenges and opportunities that this will offer, because good policies can always be turned back.
Yes, so this is... there has been some important restructuring of the migration policy in Portugal, and this came into effect at the end of October 2023 with a very important institutional change. The High Commission for Migration was extinct and ceased to exist, and a new national agency was established with a mandate that includes both integration and also documentation. This means administrative procedures regarding issuing and renewing residence permits, and these are now under the Agency for Integration, Migration and Asylum, because it also has that dimension. At the same time, the Immigration and Border Service in Portugal also ceased to exist, and border control competencies were transferred to the police. So the consequence of this change in terms of the integration impact on the migration management is that it has become secondary to the issue of regularization and documentation. So this put into context means that it is related also to the fact that there was an important backlog in the number of residence applications that needed to be handled. So this was definitely the first priority of this agency when it started operating, and meaning that the integration dimension of its activities became secondary. And also today there is no strategic national plan for integration with clear objectives and goals. And there has been a change, a shift towards more restrictive immigration policies that are being introduced, and this also affects integration. So it feels that we are a bit different from what's happening in Spain. So we have the government has eliminated the possibility of regularization after arrival, subject to a job offer or a contract, and has now put forward further changes to the immigration law, also in the domains of family reunification, making access more difficult, namely in terms of the number of years to request family reunification and the time for decision, for example. These changes have been approved by Parliament, but were rejected by the Constitutional Court following an appreciation request of the president who has to approve this new law. And the new proposal is going to be presented to Parliament soon. We knew yesterday of the new changes that the government proposes to make it more aligned with the recommendations from the Constitutional Court, but it will still need to be discussed in Parliament next week. And it's definitely going to be more restrictive than what we have now. Also regarding nationality law, new changes are also being proposed to make access more restricted. One of the dimensions is the number of years to apply for residence, for citizenship, increasing it from the current 5 to 7 to 10 years, and this is being discussed. These changes have not been through Parliament, and consultations are also taking place. So this is where we think there is a risk that more restrictions in accessing family reunification, citizenship, and indeed legal channels for migration that might have a negative impact on integration and also in the evaluation of the integration policies that Portugal has built until now. This new agency was created to bring more efficiency to the system and to implement a new approach to migration management, but the focus on regularization, whose importance is not at stake, and I wanted to also reinforce that, needs to be urgently combined with a stronger and consistent investment in integration measures, building on Portugal's proven experience in this domain. And also, I just wanted to briefly say that the anti-discrimination policy area of Portugal's approach also needs a strong investment again. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think I'll switch to this microphone. Sound engineer, what do you want me to do? Yes, this is better? All right, good. Thanks for that, Sonia. Back to you, Donica, and thank you for the patience once more. Now, we already touched on the importance of having a national integration strategy. There was a delay in your national integration strategy. Why was there a delay? And from your perspective, why is it important to have such a strategy?
Thanks again, Andy, and thanks for the discussion. It's really interesting. I suppose, yeah, I mean, if you look at the MIPEX study, one of the key issues identified and contributing to our declining score, which obviously is disappointing for us, is the delay or postponement of the national integration strategy. And I suppose what I would say is that people will know this in public service. Sometimes it's best to just do something rather than necessarily do the perfect. Sometimes it's also good to wait that little bit longer to actually take the opportunities to do something a bit more than what you originally set out to do. The simple position with our integration strategy is that a huge amount of work was done in 2023 and 24 to develop the strategy. It's effectively developed. I want to acknowledge the significant contributions played by civil society and by ordinary members of the public to the consultation around that. A lot of research around the strategy. 7,000 people made written submissions, which is a very large number for an Irish public administration consultation survey. But what essentially happened is that with the change of government earlier this year, the new programme for government commits to developing a national migration and integration strategy. So rather than have the integration strategy as standing alone over here in a little box, essentially the overarching strategy would take into account the overall plans that Ireland has, the phenomena of migration in Ireland, what our objectives are, what the needs of our Irish society and economy are into the future, how we plan for that, how we frankly address some of the challenges that gives rise to, and then integration into that. And in fact, in the course of our consultation to develop the integration strategy, one of the themes that came back was the need for a more cohesive whole of government approach. So it wouldn't just be dealing with integration as almost a little siloed thing over here, that actually it forms part of the overall debate and argument for the benefits of migration, of which there are many. So we're working on that. So we're going to need to take some more time to do that. We have until the middle of next year to do that. We will refresh the integration elements of it. We think we will emerge with a stronger long-term plan and vision for Irish society and a very strong level of political commitment to developing that. Having said all that, and I guess I maybe differ slightly with the MIPEX analysis here, I suppose, not surprisingly, I would. This doesn't mean we stopped doing integration work in the meantime. There's still significant work being done around funding streams and supports to communities. I mentioned some of the particular projects we had earlier, but there's a much broader range of activity already underway. And I would also highlight that in the course of this period of time, we've extracted the anti-racism specific work from that consultation and from that analysis, and that now forms part of the National Action Plan Against Racism. That's the model across all of the EU now. You have a national action plan and a consultative process and an engagement process around that. So there's been an awful lot of work still going on, even though we don't have, I suppose, the guiding light of the actual strategy. But I do think the forthcoming national strategy, which will be the first time we have an overarching whole of government strategy to deal with migration in Ireland. So we're actually looking across all the departments, whether it's education, employment, social affairs, very importantly, housing. All of those government departments are brought together, and they're brought together in a group chaired by my department with a view to, I guess, forging a longer term vision for what migration can be in our society and how we deal with the challenges that are very real are there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tineke. I'll turn to the room in a bit for your input, your questions, your comments. But first, in this case, I'll take a question from the online participants and then turn to you, as I said. I have a question here, which is for Sonia. Given the recent reforms in Portugal, what would you say are some of the main lessons, let's say maybe 2 lessons, that other countries can benefit from?
Well, I think one of the intentions of creating this agency, which is purely administrative and a public body, is a good example of how administrative procedures can be combined with integration measures. But again, this institutional approach needs to be well implemented to be effective. And the risk we are facing now is that regularization and documentation, because it's comparatively so much bigger, and there is a very urgent need to move on with those processes, then integration then becomes secondary in the institution. But overall, as a principle, having this administrative body that deals with all the issues from regularization to further along domains of integration is a very positive example. I think it's also important to build on the dialogue with civil society. Portugal was very strong at doing this, especially in the early 2000s when the High Commission for Migration was established. It seems to be less so now, even though the national body, the consultative body, still includes representatives of migrant communities through their migrant associations. So this is an area where good trajectories and good experiences need to be reinforced. And I would highlight these 2.
Thanks for that, and thanks for your question. Please raise your hand if you wish to contribute at this point. Yes, the gentleman in the back from my perspective, and then the gentleman in front of him. I'll come to you because you were the first to raise your hand in the first round.
Is it me?
I said the gentleman in the back, but
okay, sorry.
You'll be second.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and for this wonderful opportunity to speak with you. I am under temporary protection, so I am relocated from Ukraine, and first of all I would like to thank you. Europe. Thank you very much that you gave for us to survive. You opened your doors, and a lot of our people relocated, and now we are speaking about future. Thank you very much. My question is. My question is going from the pain what I feel in my heart, because I know how you I'm with very respectable listen all of speakers, and I know how you develop your immigration policy, because I'm following with the immigration network, and I get a lot of information. Thank you for Poland, thank you for Germany, Thank you for Ireland. Thank you for Spain. I know how much asylum seekers from Ukraine now rising there. So my question is, we have several days ago, we received new legislation. It's mean recommendation of the end of temporary protection. It's recommendation of the Council of Europe, and it means we must to relocate or to change our not stable permit for new status. Unfortunately, we are, for example, I'm speaking we have only 4,000 people under temporary protection in Luxembourg, so it's a very small part to compare with Germany, to compare with Poland. So excuse me, please, and I take your time. But we don't have access, for example, to job. Even if you have with high skills, you cannot find. If for physical, you cannot find. If you study French, je commence à parler français. Mon niveau c'est pas suffisant entrer à Bidou. Ich lerne Luxemburgisch. Ich lerne Deutsch. Sorry, but I cannot find a job. And my question is, if we, the same people like me, and the women with the children, who don't have any possibilities to find a job, so it means we don't have access for the normal status. If we will relocate, what are you feeling? Okay, in this case, excuse me, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for opening your heart, as you said at the beginning of your question. Who wishes to respond to this important input? I see a hand. I can't read it from here. Online, one of the two online speakers. No, that's not. No, the hand is not yours. Thilo.
Yeah, thank you very much for the. It's not much of a question, but of a statement as well. So, and I appreciate that very much. And I mean, it's one of the main questions we have to solve from the German perspective in the next years, since until now it's a European protection framework, and I would think that the realistic agreement upon the majority in the political field in Germany is about that most of the Ukrainian refugees will stay in Germany, and so we'll have to find a way how to bring that about, because as you already mentioned, the other legal titles to stay in a country, take the example of Germany, require some type of work, some type of being able to support oneself, and obviously that is a problem for families, for women especially, since in Germany it's mostly women who came to Germany with children. And so one of the answers, obviously, at the moment on the policy level is to help more Ukrainians to find work. And so in that way, you do not need to change much of the law, but you have a let's say more of a natural flow into other titles. So we're on the way to that. All the question of recognition of diplomas is something that is really bothering us, I would say, at a certain level, because it's a rather complicated process. It's going better and better over time, but it's not yet arrived at a point where you could say everybody really can work as its own qualification and do something out of his or her talent. And maybe the last point that is now comes more and more is that we have children who finish school, and so whose parents really are at a crossroads in a certain way, what to do now, and so how to maybe assist them with education, be it at university or in the dual system training that keeps all options open for them in a certain way. So to return at one point if they wish to, but as well to have a chance in the German labor market. So maybe at the moment the focus is more on the factual help to meet the requirements for normal legal status, and the other thing will certainly be something needed to be looked at in due time.
But definitely an interesting approach to take to this important question. more comments. I think the gentleman over there had his hand up. And then we move to the other side.
Thank you. Oh, that's loud. I'm Stefano Deodati. I'm a former employee of MPG, so I've had the pleasure to work on the MIPEX for a few years. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful event, and Isabelle and Başak and all the panelists. So my question ties in a little bit with the points raised by Francesco in terms of regularization. Just yesterday, I attended the public screening of a documentary called The Pickers, part of a campaign called Meet the Pickers, which deals with the exploitation of undocumented agricultural workers across Europe and states such as Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal. And the reality of these people is one which would greatly benefit from regularization. These people are vital to the agricultural sector across Europe, and yet they work in conditions that don't allow them to do it in the light within the law. So my question is, apart from Spain, which we've heard of, if there are programs or if there is talk of regularizing people that are at risk of being exploited, especially in the context of the looming proposal of the new return directive, which promises to restrict even further the rights of people that are then subject to possibly deportation and detention.
Thanks very much. I think I'll give this question to Sonia, but not after hearing from the participant over there. Put your hands up so they know where you are. Thanks for your question. Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Odilia Abreu from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. And first of all, thank you very much to the panelists. It was very relevant to listen to realities from different countries. I believe that many of us in this room, we are migrants. And we know that integration is a two-way process that goes beyond legislation. If there is no real commitment by host societies, integration mechanism will fail. We will not succeed. So I would like to know, in your work, which indicators or which mechanism do you use to measure this change of public attitudes, or also the level of social interaction between nationals and newcomers, and as well, if there is legislation that covers these both aspects, whether whole society as well as in newcomers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, let's take one more.
Hi again. So, because she mentioned that most of us here are migrants, I wanted to ask something more generic. I understand all the policies and everything regarding, on national level for each European country. But what about those migrants who were born in an EU country, do not possess EU citizenship, and wish to work for EU institutions or abroad? I can rephrase it if it was not
in one sentence, yes.
Yes.
So
what about those migrants who do not possess, for example, like Italian passport or
third country nationals?
Yes, and wish to work for
European institutions?
Yes, and cannot.
Okay, thank you.
Due to policies, I mean. Thank you
very much. All right, I'll briefly the response to the question on people in the agricultural sector. Sonia.
Okay, and if I may, I'll comment on the other two as well, just very briefly. In Portugal, there was this system that allowed regularization for workers that had entered the country either regularly or irregularly, and they would have a mechanism to regularize if they had a job or a job offer. And this also impacted many agricultural workers who had access to regularization. Because of different constraints, change in policy, COVID, the number of applications under this procedure were so high that then this new agency had a very huge backlog, and also the government decided to change the policy. So this is no longer possible. The strong message of the Portuguese government at the moment is that companies need to invest in regular mechanisms for migration. So the kind of systems that Spain is introducing from origin country to the destination country, with the documentation from the origin, also in the agricultural sector. And there are different companies now looking at how to actually implement this possibility, because they no longer have available the possibility of hiring an immigrant that is already in the country and then asking for regularization. This is no longer possible. So there is now a strong political message and also an investment also in the private sector to look at these legal channels for migration. And this is definitely the way forward as far as policymaking in Portugal is concerned. Just let me mention briefly regarding the question of the attitudes of the host society and how these perceptions are being measured. In Portugal, there was an independent foundation. I don't know if you know of it, is the Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, who published late last year a study on perceptions of migration. It has, of course, it's when you look at perceptions, the questions you ask and how you ask them matter to the kind of answers you receive. But it was an important independent study that tried to look a little bit deeper into how we may look beyond the political manipulation of discourses to how the host societies actually feel about migration. And it's, I think, an interesting
So
example.
how does the Portuguese society feel about migration?
Less welcoming than before. So the results are a little bit more worrying than they were in previous studies on perceptions or the European Barometer, for example. But it's the idea of perception and how you have to handle those perceptions. If they are really at these lower levels of support for migration, then what you have to do to support through policy higher
acceptance rates.
Acceptance and also society. I just wanted to mention briefly regarding the issue of the nationality. The action plan for integration and inclusion, I think one of the advantages that it brought to the table was the recognition of Europeans with a migratory background. So I think that's already an interesting policy development at the EU level.
Very good. Renata, are there any questions you'd like to respond to? Perhaps pick the most important.
Okay, maybe the first question about the regularization of migrants. I think that this issue is not discussed in Poland, but I think that the main reason for this is that the policy towards labor migrants in Poland is very liberal. In fact, everyone who, maybe it will change in the near future, but so far, everyone who wanted to work in Poland legally could apply for a work visa and come. And I think that for a very long time, Poland had the most liberal policy towards labor immigration.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. Tineke, I have a question for you. And that is, we've heard that there's a lot of positive energy, good practices, lots of successes at the local policy level in cities. How are you exchanging with local policymakers as to improve national policies and to capitalize on the positive energy that is to be found in cities?
I think that's really important. As we've discussed in a couple of different settings today, the role of local actions, both voluntary and local state actions, is really important. As I said, we essentially fund a network of people working in local authorities. So we have an existing network there that we can tap into. Since 2024, they're all in place now. And there's a very good question from Carolina there in the chat group asking about how we look to inform a national policy for that. I think that's a work in progress. I think it's certainly a resource we need to tap into. I think Carolina's question calls out the idea that there is growing anti-immigrant sentiment in some communities. I wouldn't be naive or blasé about that, but I think there's quite a complex situation on the ground. I think some of the research that's being done by some of the specialist bodies in Ireland draws that out, that actually the views on the ground are quite mixed. Where I live myself in the city centre, it was a location of quite a high-profile number of protests about the location of a centre for asylum seekers. And yet if you go back to that centre now and you visit it, you see a wide range of really positive local community engagement with the residents of that centre, and really positive and quite uplifting ways in which local people recognise their commonality and empathy with people who are fleeing persecution. So it's complex, and but I think there's definitely a resource there. And again, feeding that resource into a national strategy is part of our role, and we need to build those links with local actors. Thanks.
Right. I'd like to turn to the room. Now, we've been talking about good practices. Are there any good practices that you would like to put on the table for us to discuss, or to at least take note of? And before I give you the floor, I'll give you 1 minute to energize your brains and talk about that topic to any of your neighbors. And if you could pick someone who you do not know, that would be even better. So what are some of the good practices that you know of that we haven't discussed and that you would like to bring to the table? You have 1 minute. Go for it. Okay, 20 seconds. Ten seconds. Now try to conclude your discussion. Thank you for your collaboration. Thank you very much. And what a polite room you are. All right, so let's go for a round of input from the room. Any interesting good practices that we haven't considered that you'd like to share?
Thank you. So I'm Rita from Forward Inc., and we work in refugee entrepreneurship, which means that we give like year-long formations for people that want to start a business, and from like the start of the idea. And these refugees and migrants are people that come from, I don't know, Syria, the Middle East, and Africa. And in their own countries, they're very skilled. They're maybe engineers and technicians, and when they arrive here, it is not recognized, as we spoke about earlier. So a practice that I would think about is maybe more serious and more intense investment in recognizing the diplomas and assessing them.
yeah, I believe that there's a lot that can be brought. People that want to work, they want to show their skills, but they're unable to for, well, no concrete reason except inaction, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, the gentleman over there with the striped shirt. Yes.
I was going to talk about combating misinformation, which I know is sort of a particular problem in.
Can you just repeat that? You were going to talk about
combating misinformation.
Misinformation, yes.
Yeah, which I know is a particular problem in places with high numbers of Ukrainian refugees. Like there are a lot of myths about Ukrainian women in particular, but it's also a sort of more general problem surrounding refugees and migrants across Europe.
And so your comment is that it's important to do something about that issue in particular.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. So I work for VFS Global. So it's a visa outsourcing company, highly regulated, and we serve many member states, Schengen member states, most of the member states that are today present. So would you consider, or just sharing an example, so we work with Malta to verify skills and also remove all the administrative burden for residence permit, work permit, etc. And in fact, we observed that we can do it at scale. So we started in January in the sector of hospitality, and there are 18,000 third country nationals coming from 40 countries that benefited from that scheme. So I would like just to share the role of a visa outsourcing company that would go a bit beyond their core activity. And as they are present in most of the countries with thousands of visa application centers, would you consider these kind of companies to play a role to facilitate migration?
Very good, and thanks for that question. Maybe we can even broaden the question and say, what is the role of the private sector, generally speaking, in the discussion that we've been having? Before I ask the panel to touch on that question and the other excellent remarks, let me turn to you, Francesco, with a question that comes from the online audience. Based on your experience, the question is, what is to you the one key takeaway to ensure inclusivity in policies that perhaps also goes beyond migrants? So inclusiveness, inclusion for migrants as well as for non-migrants.
So we are talking about anti-discrimination or integration policies in general?
I would guess it's integration policies.
Okay. Well, it's a very good question. I think that there is no one approach that is better than other. It always depends on context, and I open some brackets here with a disclaimer about using MIPEX score because they are often misused to make rankings across countries, but I think that we always need to have in mind that policy solution needs to be adjusted to the specific context and the reality, including historical migratory profile, socio-demographic condition, economic condition, and so on of the country at stake. So, and I close the brackets. This is to say that there is no one and only answer to this question. I think that it's a matter to, on the one hand, at conceptual level and in the definition of integration, try to include, and without try, include both the immigrant population, but also the host society in the equation. And on the other hand, getting back to one of those that were the former question regarding the social interaction, how to improve the social interaction, because after all, it's about the same matter. I think that it's a matter that goes far beyond the legal framework. And it's a matter for the policymaker to provide a condition for a good social cohesion and for a good integration. That means resources, competencies, coordination, and the structure of multi-level governance that involves all the key actors that needs to play their key role in this process. So regional government, local government, and civil society.
Thank you very much. Let's take two more remarks from the room, and then I'll return to the panel to close. And I will give precedence to those who have not spoken yet, if there are any. All right, seeing none, then I'll turn to you. Your brief remark, please.
Regarding the practices, I was thinking about art and artistic practices, and if it will be possible, or if it's yes, how art can also facilitate in the integration policies and in the anti-discrimination in general, for the prejudice, the stereotypes, and
Excellent addition. Thank you very much. Now I'll give each member of the panel a turn to speak about 45 seconds with your final thoughts, because this is the final panel. And I'll start with you, Renata. Your brief concluding thoughts.
Okay, so I think that maybe it's very important what Francesca said before, that when we analyze different policies, for example, integration policies, we should analyze the differences between policies on paper, how they are in fact in reality implemented, and also the differences between the discourses and what policies are actually implemented. Sometimes they are more favorable for migrants than what we hear from politicians.
Okay, and thank you for keeping it brief. Thilo. Feel also free to respond to any of the questions as long as it's short.
Maybe one with regard to the Ukrainian misinformation question. We have one project that we fund in our office that is digital social street work, which are people that are active in social media groups and try to help people understand German labor system, questions of labor rights, for example. So if there are discussions about dismissal of somebody, and so to correct misinformation, not about Ukrainians, but misinformation maybe about the German labor market, about misinformation about rights that people actually have and how they can use them, for example. So that might be one very important project. We have it for EU migrants in Germany as well. It's a different project. So that's maybe my final remark. So there are innovative digital projects that can as well help on a very practical level with
combating misinformation. Very good. Sonia, very briefly.
Also, I think I would put the emphasis on innovation and also looking at this recognition of skills and trajectories, because our labor markets are still very much designed to capture the current workers as perceived by the employers. And now we are facing a world that it's much more mobile with different experiences and perspectives. So we really need to innovate at how we look at skills and the recognition of competencies and diplomas to be able to make it effective for the different profiles that now make up our labor markets.
Thank you, Sonia. Donica, your key takeaway for us.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think I'd just echo Theo's emphasis on the question of misinformation. I think there is a growing awareness in public life, certainly in Ireland, of the need to respond as quickly as possible to rumours that go around, innuendo that goes around, to provide facts and information as soon as possible. It's very challenging in a digital age, and it's certainly something we need to all step up our game on. Thanks.
Thank you. Francesco, enlighten us with your final thought.
Yeah, I will complement what has already been said about misinformation. And I think that in this sense, MIPEX represent a strategic and very useful tool for evidence-based policy reasoning in view of building better integration, better inclusion. I think it's one tool. It's a necessary condition, not the only one for building this kind of policy reasoning. But I think that this is the direction that the politics and the political reflection needs to go through in viewing of addressing the challenges of integration, and especially considering misinformation, rising hate speech, and rising xenophobia that we are seeing in the European Union.
Thank you very much. This concludes our second and final panel. Please join me in thanking Donica, Francesco, Tilo, Renata, and Sonia. Thank you.
Give us the floor.
Yeah, we do. All right. Come back. Sure, I'll just do that. All right. So let us quickly go on. I thank the panelists once more, those who participated in the first and the second. And I also want to thank all of you here in Brussels as well as online for contributing your excellent questions and remarks. Now we have closing remarks, and they are titled Looking Ahead, Takeaways for Inclusive Policy Futures. And the speakers are Başak, who you already know, as well as Thomas Huddleston, who is from the University of Liège and MPG member of the board. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Well, so when I joined MPG in 2006, I didn't realize that something like MIPEX would take off so much, as I think really it is one of the main ways that help us to understand what we can do, right, through our policies, through our leadership, to make life better for a diverse society, and to debate that in the future. So just to conclude, I wanted to give some of my conclusions about how we need to expand this and look more globally, because the world is changing Europe. I want us to look a little bit more on what the results have to say for Europe, and again, better understand the impact that these policies are having on people. So this is the MIPEX for the EU 27, and it's not global. And it really needs to go global, because the direction that our policies are going to take are going to be shaped by global threats and anti-democratic pressures. I originally am from the United States, and I talk a lot now about Trumpification, because I think we in Europe got used to someone like Orban, and we didn't really think, well, what happens when the extreme right takes over immigration policies with a lot of power behind them? And so we can't just look to Canada. That's, of course, inspiring. But we need to look to the other places that are experiencing the kind of decline that we are, because you can't understand the MIPEX results right now if you don't also understand that most of our countries have the most right-wing government ever, right? Or many of our countries have little wannabe Trumps. And at the same time, we need to not just look at what's going on in countries like the United States, but many other big destination countries, like in South America, that are also feeling these huge pressures. And when the EU is also talking about, for example, deportation hubs or working with countries of transit, we need to actually understand what are the rights and integration policies for immigrants in all of those countries. So like in Turkey, in North Africa. So it's really a plea that MIPEX needs to go global so that we can better understand where the battles will be and be better prepared. We also need to understand what it's like to deal with immigration in authoritarian countries and countries experiencing democratic decline. So that's why MIPEX needs to go global. But secondly, I wanted to help us think through what the results for Europe really have to say. So our approach to integration has stalled and stagnated, even though we've gone through some of the greatest social challenges over the past 5 years. We had COVID, we had the war in Ukraine. But if you think about it, the problem is we've been always thinking these are temporary problems. COVID, it's going to be fine. Everyone will be vaccinated. The migrants will be fine, right? Without addressing the inequalities in our health systems. And the Ukrainians who are here under temporary protection because they don't want to be here and they will go home, right? So let's make targeted policies for them, not touch our systems. And so I think that explains again why MIPEX sees that Europe is not actually investing more in integration, and these strategies are going to fail us, right? Many Ukrainians are not going to be able to go home because, let's be honest, the situation is not going to be easy for many people. And we're going to be confronted by so many more shocks to our systems, right? Not just health shocks. And so I do think it's time for anyone in an institutional role to send much stronger message that we need to be investing in integration. Look at the past 10 years since the 2015-16 large-scale arrival of Syrians and the great successes and leadership that that has brought, and the power that we had by saying, we are going to come together as a society and we can handle this. And we've not been doing that over the past 5 years. And instead, we ended up with these policies that are very contradictory. You know, again, MIPEX, what does MIPEX find? Well, countries are not investing a lot in integration policies, but maybe a little bit if it's going to help immigrants' health, or a little bit if it'll help their employment, or a little bit if it'll help their education. But let's not include them in our democracy, and let's not make them citizens, and let's not bring their families together. And this is where, again, what we're seeing, MIPEX talks about this as temporary integration. You give people basic rights and some opportunities, but you don't give them a vision of the future. They don't have a secure future. And unfortunately, what that means is people then don't invest in their society. They don't invest in the huge skills and effort that it takes, and also local communities don't invest. And this is where, again, you, by using MIPEX, I think can show the impact that these policies have on people. I want to just reiterate that because MIPEX exists, we've had hundreds of multivariate quantitative analyses that show, you know, the strong link between policies and public opinion. There's a virtuous or a vicious cycle there, but also that these policies, even though they struggle to be implemented, they do have effects. Yeah, they can change things. They're not going to change the world, but these are how we can have reasonable expectations for what we can do. And unfortunately, for example, one of the best ways to improve immigrants' labor market outcomes is to make them citizens. One of the best ways to improve the educational outcomes of immigrant children is to get them into the country as soon as possible. Facilitated family unification, right? So unfortunately, if we don't think about making these investments, we are going to be driven by a very small minority of Europeans who are listening to who are importing some really toxic American products right now. There should be a tariff on that. And are taking us away from our values. So I really recommend that use things like MIPEX, look at all of the great academic research that is proving how these policies can have an effect, and warning us that if we don't actually take more of a clear direction in our integration policies, we are going to end up with people who are marginalized, who are excluded, and perhaps end up with some of the horrors that we're seeing around the world.
Thank you, Thomas. That was a lot of food for thought. And I'm going to follow up where you have left and go a bit deeper into what we've talked about in terms of the different policy areas. But before doing this, I want to say a few things about why we put this event together. We wanted to get the attention, set the agenda at the EU level for the EU policymakers to support integration at the national level. It's not because we didn't know that not all areas of integration are the competencies of the Commission. We're aware of that. But in the areas where it has competencies, we are seeing how much of a progress can be achieved, and we want to encourage this. And secondly, we also want to acknowledge, and we've been doing national launches, we've been developing new indexes like MIPEX-L, looking at the local level. So we are aware that there is there are many dimensions of integration policy making. But what we see over and over is that when the higher takes even a small step, it makes it very easy for lower levels to take further steps. So it's important to start at the EU, encourage them to collaborate with the local level for more multi-level governance, multi-level support. And that is why I want to encourage all the EU institutions to continue doing this, especially also now that we're talking more the pact and how it will be implemented. Now, I want to take us now to the backsliding that we have ended with, the previous panel, actually. We've been praising how great Ireland was doing, and unfortunately we had some backsliding. We've been praising how great Portugal was doing, and actually it has improved its policy, but now we see a little bit of signs of backsliding to come, which is very worrisome. And we've been focusing on the mid-level, low-scoring, middle scoring countries and showing them the good examples, but maybe we have forgotten about those good practices, good high scoring countries, because they too need support, right? So it is also hard to hold on to good integration policies and also detect where issues begin. And one area where we see the discussions always start with the backsliding is citizenship, and citizenship acquisition and access to citizenship, which is very basic, the basis of integration, really. And we have a few things to say over this. It is really easy, right, to pick on citizenship, but as those who work in integration, we don't see citizenship as an end of integration. It is as just another step on the path of integration, because acquisition of citizenship exactly allows for better labor market integration, better educational integration, better political integration, higher identification with the host community. So it is just one of those stages one goes through. Yeah, it's a later stage, it's true, but the earlier it happens, the higher prospects there is for further integration. And making this difficult, creating additional requirements, is clearly an obstacle. We look at all the studies conducted all over with regards to the impact of different restrictions, different rules, additional rules, and we see that even without, not everyone is naturalizing, right? There are obstacles, but even a little bit of increase in the application of citizenship creates actually a major drop in applications for naturalization. Even a little bit of increase in language acquisition creates these obstacles. More importantly, it is a very dangerous tool because there are good ways of doing it and not so good ways of doing it. We've been advised on this by Finland, and there are very good ways of doing language courses, cultural integration. We see it from Belgium a bit, right? Good ways of doing it in the Flemish-speaking region, not so good ways of doing it in the French-speaking area, where it's really hard. There's a long waiting list. It's whereas in Flemish-speaking region, it's very online. You can take it in so many languages. This integration courses, the language courses are subsidized, etc. So, whereas in Netherlands, they cost a lot of money. And this creates then an obstacle. And all of these obstacles are the first things that backsliding triggers. And it's really punishing those that have been integrating already, which doesn't make sense. So I think we need to be very careful about this and really be alert. And even if we do understand there could be pressures for more language, expectations for higher language acquisition or better knowledge of the culture and norms in a society, but there are good ways of doing it and there are bad ways of doing it for creating obstacles. The second issue that I want to address very quickly is the labor market integration. That area is something that we've seen how the Commission within its competencies can act proactively and create good harmonization. And however, what we're still missing is legal pathways. What we're still missing is, what we have instead is a focus on high skilled. And this focus on high skilled comes with this assumption that high skilled are going to just come to a country which allows them an easier visa, an easier work permit. Well, this is not the reality. Especially the high skilled, which tend to be highly educated, are aware of the integration frameworks in that country. They too have children that are going to be going to school. They have families who will be benefiting from healthcare services. So we encourage policymakers to consider integration policies as a whole without cherry picking migrants, because high skilled too, especially the high skilled, are aware of the integration policies of the countries, just like all the asylum seekers are. So, and the legal pathways is also something that we do not directly address, but with regards to the work permits, acquisition, the family unification, we somewhat touch upon, but we think that the examples brought by Spain are phenomenal and very important, and both in terms of regularization, but also, you know, creating pathways through education, through vocational skills into the labor market in a very neat way. And I think the results should be followed very closely by all member states and the EU and be promoted, because it seems like it's working very well. Finally, one last word on the Ukrainians. I do strongly agree that even with Ukrainians, instead of a permanence approach, instead of an integration approach, we came with again, the repetition of a precarity with this temporary approach. And that is, and we are seeing the results of this among our audience as well. Recently, with some colleagues, very respectable colleagues from Sciences Po, I conducted a study where we basically showed that migrant integration policies, as measured by MIPEX, by our good old MIPEX, actually have an important impact on how Ukrainians are integrating. And Germany is a good case where, because Germany gives time to get some education, learn a language, get some maybe degree equivalence establishment a bit challenging, but give some time, give some support, financial support gave some support for this. The gradual labor market integration happened at a much better way than other places. What do I mean by that? They were not doctors who became Uber drivers, right? So, and that's not something we want. So I think that is also very important. And one last thing I want to say is also to look at the comparative data, which is very valuable. US may not be very inspiring at the moment, but among us, we have our Canadian friends, and we just, I just came back from a launch of Canadian results, and they are super inspiring. The way they approach citizenship, the high naturalization rates, as well as the labor market integration policies, as well as the, healthcare, whatever area you pick on, and they are also in the top 5, and where the sense, the feeling is a very positive, welcoming environment where the discussions were things that we didn't really touch upon, such as political participation, which was so inspiring for me. I'm like, finally, we can talk about something that is seen, so low in ranking normally, but it is very important. And it is precisely because of this, very low ranking area across the board in all countries around the world, political participation, that integration policies are not inclusive, because when migrants don't have a seat at the table, they cannot affect the outcomes of policies. I thank you very much, and I'll turn to Ali for the closing remarks, and we're looking forward to your feedback. We're looking forward to you using MIPEX data. The website is fully updated. Please take advantage of it. It was Great seeing you and hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Başak. Now, this might feel like you're in high school, but it's important enough to keep you another 3 minutes for you to participate in the survey. There should be a QR code on the screen. There it is. It is the evaluation which will make our work much better. Should you prefer to have it in hard copy, there are hard copies available right in the back of the room. Am I correct? So you can take one and fill it in. It'll take you just 3 minutes, I was promised. So go ahead and I'll be back in 3 minutes. All right, I think most of you are finished. So allow me to congratulate MPG one more time on your excellent report, as well as your anniversary. And thank everyone who contributed to organizing this important event. And thank all of you for your participation. Please join us for a drink in the back of this room. Thank you very much.